proposals. Comparative to private sector, or even, I can't say the state is any better, but even local governments do not have all of the regulations and the thickness of the proposals that come out. So we want to talk a little bit about how to do that. Follow the instructions without exception. We're going to re-emphasize that if you do not follow the instructions, if you do not do things that they want you to do specifically, numbering, lettering, things like that, you could be bounced. And this is something we want you to understand, is that you cannot be creative in this section. The third thing, probably the most important, is we want you to write to the client. There's going to be a couple key phrases I leave with you today. And the first one I want to leave with you is lower their risk. And what do we mean by lower their risk? You need to present your information. You need to write to the client, not what you want to tell them about yourself, but what they want to hear about you. So you've got to twist your mind around that and say, how do I lower their risk? How do I tell them what they want to know? How do I quantify that, qualify that? How do I make it so that they have a lower risk? They are comfortable and confident that I can do the job. Excuse me. Terry, myself, Mary Jo, all of us that have written what we have to do a write-up, basically a very detailed write-up of how we selected our contractor. And a lot of the verbiage in that write-up will be about risk. This offer has too high a risk to the government, meaning they're going to fail, or we're going to have to expend a lot more time or energy helping them along, or we don't think that they have the capability of getting it done, so we're going to get the product late, or we're not going to get it at all. So we have to, our write-ups a lot of times use that word risk. This contractor offer is a low risk. This offer is a high risk. And at the end of the day, it's going to be about risk. So how do you write to the client to make sure that you're lowering their risk and upping your opportunity? So we're going to talk about that. Last but not least, it always seems to be kind of an afterthought, but we really recommend that you consider what we call a red team review. Red team is a term of art that is out there in the business world that says these are the types of teams that you form to write your proposals, you know, who signs it, who develops it, who prices it. And one of the teams that they refer to is a red team review. And this is the team that looks at it, proofs it, basically is your editor, making sure that you've done everything that you need to do. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit of detail. So let's talk about how to read and understand solicitations. Now, normally this would take, we have a class, our first classes that we started doing, we took 4 hours just to go through, you know, how do you read your contract? Because a lot of people are new to this process. And this is where you stumble probably the most, especially as you're starting out, because you don't understand what it is you're looking at, where to find the information, where these hidden terms and clauses are that will not help you in the end. So PTAC offers a lot of these classes. I would encourage you, we're going to go through some of these things today, but I would encourage that if you are fairly new to reading solicitations or RFPs or even requests for quotes, that you get with someone in the PTAC and have them walk you through the contract, where to look for things, make sure you're not missing key elements. Because again, the government literally has a checklist. When they're reviewing it, when the reviewers are looking at it, they have a checklist and they're going through check, check, check. If you do not provide something, they're not going to call you up and ask you for that. They're going to say you're out. So we want to make sure you understand the types of solicitations, whether you're looking for a request for quote, whether you're looking for a technical proposal, whether or not they're offering you a, you know, what type of contract and what type of information. So you want to really understand the types of solicitations and what's expected from you. Today, we're mostly talking about what we would consider an RFP, or what would be an RFP, a request for proposal, because request for quotes would be a price. Request for proposal means that you're going to actually prepare a document to explain something to the government, either how you're going to do it, how you've done it in the past, or some kind of experience that they want to see. There are uniform contract formats. The FAR is very specific about what has to go into what section, and all the contracting officers and their programs are set up to put it in the right format. But I would caution you, the reason we talk about this is that contracting officers make mistakes. You know, the computers sometimes make mistakes. Sometimes you check the wrong block and that provision goes into the wrong section. So you need to know where you can expect to find this information that you need. How do I prepare the proposal? How's it going to be evaluated? When is it due? How do I fill out the forms? Where are my reps and certs? But oftentimes you also have to know how to do a quick scan of your RFP. Maybe if it's a PDF, you do a quick scan, find your clauses, find your provisions, because there have been mistakes. There have been cases where the contracting officer inadvertently put something in the wrong section, it was overlooked, and that could affect your bid. So you need to be familiar with the uniform contract format. I think I have a slide in here that talks about it very briefly. We're going to go over it. But again, get yourself familiar long before you ever start bidding. If you're looking to do work with the government, start investigating, looking at their solicitations that they put out. You can also look at solicitations that they put out in the past that have been awarded. This is generally where I always get this wrong, but it's, I always call it FedBizOps. It is now beta.sam.gov, if I'm not correct. Terry, will you nod your head if I got that right? I always get it wrong.
That's the website, but within the website is called Contract Opportunities to Find Solicitations.
And within that, what used to be FedBizOps, you can see anything that the government has over $25,000 is required to be advertised, and that's where they're going to advertise it. Unless, of course, I just mentioned those MACs and JOCs and things like that, they go directly to those contractors. But any open opportunities over $25,000 are supposed to be advertised there. They will keep track of the ones that are upcoming, the ones that are in the future, the ones that are active, and the ones that have been awarded. And as if you're starting out in this, and you're interested in doing it, go look at those. Go find your NAICS codes, find out who's buying them. Look at how their contract was set up. Get familiar with the process. Because when you get an opportunity, when something hits for an RFP, you're given sometimes 15, 30, generally no more than about 45 days to get this put together. And it's a little late to try to be learning how the contract is set up. So take the opportunity if you're interested. Work with someone from PTAC and they'd be more than happy to explain that process to you. Understand the forms of what it is you have to submit, what you have to fill out. You miss a key piece of information, you will be, you know, your proposal will be discarded or disqualified and it'll be sent back to you. Understand, we want to talk about the parts of the solicitation numbering system. I've got a real quick little guide here for you. We want you to understand how your pricing is put together. The government is very, they've got these tables, they have contract line items they want you to price. They might have sub-clans, which are, you know, supplementary, but they may only be if you are doing, they're going to order them at that price later. What are ELINs? Again, the pricing structure and how the government sets it up and how they use it is pretty unique to the government. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're familiar with that process. Clauses versus provisions. This is something that is always, seems to be a confusion. I guess I'm government trained. I always knew the difference, but this has become a problem for a lot of contractors that don't understand the difference between what is a clause and what is a provision. And if you've ever read a government solicitation, ever looked at a contract, you'll see hundreds of clauses. Some of them are referenced just by title. Some of them are referenced in full text or provided in full text. But more often than not, they're just incorporated by reference, which means you have to be familiar with all of these clauses and provisions. What's the difference between a clause and a provision? A clause is a term that applies after award. So you have to comply with these. You have to have an ethics program. You have to pay Davis-Bacon wages. You know, you have to have EEO requirements and participation. You have to maybe have a small business subcontracting plan. You can't have child labor. I mean, they go on and on and on. They'll even tell you that you have to print two-sided if you really dig into it on paper. A provision is a request or a term that applies before you award. It's a condition upon your award. Are you certifying that you're not owned by a third world country? Are you certifying that you will ship U.S. Everything will be shipped under U.S. flag? So the difference is whether or not it applies before award or whether it applies after award, and you need to be able to know the difference of those. You also need to start being attentive, as I always encourage people to do, is start printing out those clauses. Don't just assume that you understand it. Don't understand that just because you understand the title about an ethics program that you understand what they're looking for.
Mona?
Yes.
Someone is asking, Kevin's asking, can you spend just a minute to further define CLIN, sub-CLIN, and ELIN? They just roll off.
and Terry or Mary Jo, you might jump in here to help me. I'm going to do my best to explain it. A CLIN is a contract line item number, and generally it's in your Schedule B, or when we look at how it's broken out, how they want you to price it. Do they want you to price each item? Do they want you to roll it all up? Do they want to have, it's how your bid structure is going to be broken down. Sometimes it's one CLIN, one contract line item number, meaning one total price. Sometimes it's multiple CLINs, contract line item numbers. They want you to price demolition, then they want you to price design, then they want you to price the actual construction. Maybe it's providing a service, maybe it's operating the IT desk, and then maybe the next CLIN might be providing supplies. So it's a contract line item number is a breakdown of your prices, how they want you to submit your prices. Sometimes they'll list CLINs as options. Now this is always confusing, and we have to kind of watch this also, is that sometimes a CLIN will be an option item, which means they don't award it this time, but they reserve the right to do that. The reason I mention that is because you have expenses, you have overheads. How you price your contract or your proposal or your offer is going to be based on how you can recover your cost. You're always going to have direct costs such as labor, material, equipment, but you're going to have these overheads and profit that you mark up on these. So as you start to break these items out, you want to make sure that you're recovering those costs when you need to recover them. So a sub-CLIN could be, of course, is just exactly what it means. It's a sub-line item underneath that CLIN. It may break down each of those costs separately so that if they were to do a mod or amend something, they could go to that sub-CLIN and say, okay, part of your demolition was, 35 cents a square foot for removing sheetrock. I mean, my construction is my background, so you're always going to hear it in that terms. They want to know what that price for that sub-CLIN, again, being a sub, it's part of the overall CLIN. You've priced it, but now they want to know the individual breakdowns. They might use that in the future for determining how they're going to price a mod. So you want to be careful about making sure, again, are you looking at how do I price that? Have I covered all my overheads in my CLIN, only breaking down the sub-CLINs? Do all the sub-CLINs have to total the CLIN? It's just very cumbersome. An ELIN, Terry, Mary Jo, I don't remember what the E stands for.
It's escaping me right now also. But ELINs are not in section B, they are in section J. They
Yes.
provide information for the contractor to provide their prices in section B under CLINs and sub-CLINs.
And a lot of times,
I'm reading the E stands for exhibit.
Okay,
Exhibit
thank you.
line item.
Now you teach us. And sometimes those are used for informational. Again, government being very clever that if they're asking you for informational or exhibit information, it may be used later for pricing mods or actions in the future. It may be for not to exceed quantities that they want to issue later. So each of those, and I'm not sure that that's kind of a 30,000 foot level there, because you really need to dive into it, and you need to spend time with someone from the PTAC or someone explaining why are they having me price it this way? What are they going to use that information for? Because you want to make sure that you have covered your costs, that you are just putting, I find a lot of contractors in their sub-CLINs or in the ELINs put their bare cost and don't put markups on it. Okay, and that's a big mistake, because the government may have said in their solicitation, I'm going to use the prices on your ELIN as unit prices, and I'm going to award you that as we get into extra dirty dirt or extra services or extra hours or things like that. But you forgot to put your markups in it. It's covered somewhere else. So you're not recovering the cost. You're recovering the cost possibly to do the work, but you're not making any money on it. And I don't know anybody on this call today that isn't interested in making some money. So understanding how they price that and how they want to price that and what they want to use that information for is very important.
Okay, thank you for that extra explanation.
Well, I hope it helped a little bit.
Yeah, let me add to that. So Mona did a great job in identifying CLIN and sub-CLIN. So a CLIN is a subject area. A sub-CLIN is a breakdown of that CLIN. As Mona said, it could be multiple sub-CLINs under a CLIN. All the sub-CLINs need to add up in price to the value of your CLIN. So if your CLIN is $1 million and there's 4 sub-CLINs below that, which further breaks down the prices of the CLIN, those 4 sub-CLINs add up to the value of your CLIN, $1 million.
And
That's
while that seems perfectly straightforward, again, the question is, why are they having you break down those costs? Is it for evaluation purposes only, or is there something hidden in the terms that are talking about if it's extended, or if we have to cut a mod, we're only giving you that at that unit rate? So it's very important to not only understand how you're pricing it, how you're spreading your overheads, but what are they using that information for? And I'm not saying it is malicious. I'm just saying that they have very specific instructions. And you may want to, if you do ever see sub-CLINs, you're going to want to know why. What's that for, and how do I do that properly? Okay. And we talked about clauses versus provisions. Reps and certs, you're going to have to understand what you have to certify, whether or not you have separate. Most of the time they ask you if you're in SAM, which you have to be in SAM in order to be eligible for award. Your reps and certs are primarily done there. But there is a section in each RFP that allows them to add additional certs that aren't in your SAM registration. One of the things that I also caution you on is that reps and certs are done annually. And this, as a matter of fact, just happened to us on an award recently, is the reps and certs in SAM are your annual certification of your company size, your compliance, things that you're going to do. You're not debarred. It does talk about that you will ship everything US flag. There's just a lot of reps and certs in there that they require you to fill out. It's annual. One of the things that you've got to be very aware of is that you say, yes, my reps and certs is up to date. You need to make sure that your reps and certs are up to date, but they also reflect what is this solicitation. I helped a client in the past that they had said, yes,
We have vision. That's
everything under US flag.
and it tracks
Absolutely.
everything. It's an ERP system. And we just switched to it and signed a 3-year contract. So
I'm not sure what that is that needs to mute, but you're not muted. So, so they represented in their reps and certs that they would ship
we
everything,
have government client contracts and we have to get new accounting systems.
the flag.
We've already done that with this program, so we won't be switching for 3 years.
Ooh.
I think so. Bye-bye. You too, bye-bye.
Kathy, can you mute them?
Yeah, please make sure you're muted.
Thank you. Anyway, back to my story. Reps and certs, yes, we would ship everything under US flag. We don't anticipate that, but this happens to be bidding on a contract that was going to be done overseas. And there was no requirement that we use US flag ship because there was no US flags going to that. So now there's a conflict between the reps that are normally out there, annual certifications, and specific to the solicitation. So before you submit your proposal, we want you to make sure that your reps and certs filled out in SAM are complete. They have to be complete in order to even be eligible for award, but they don't conflict with anything that is actually in your scope of work. You want to make sure that that's done. It was interesting recently, we submitted a proposal and got award, and the contracting officer came back and said, oh, your rep and certs aren't up to date because they had now included some new reps and certs that were not in the last annual update. So in all fairness, we were not up to date. We didn't go and check. We were still current, but they had updated some of the requirements. So it's a very, it's a minefield of opportunities that you need to check right before you submit. That one, you're looking at the current reps and certs because they do update clauses and requirements all the time, and that you haven't missed anything, and that the ones that are in SAM are particular and are relevant to this solicitation. It could be a missed opportunity if something isn't done quite right. And we want you to understand what the submission and evaluation criteria is. And I think that what I'm going to do now is, here's a quick sample of how the uniform contract is laid out. Couple key things I want to point out is that if you're open up an RFP and it has sections that have alpha numbers in front of them, you're going to be looking at a services or supply contract. You're looking at something that is not construction. Construction and supplies and services, both of them are separate, and they have two different sections, two different uniform contract formats, but the requirements and the information is the same. So we kind of want to walk through these real quick. So mostly you're going to see in supplies and services A through M. You'll notice down there, we're going to talk, A is basically the cover sheet, some information on it, who's issuing it, very straightforward form. B is where you're going to see, and of course the corresponding sections over there for construction. B is where you're going to find your schedule of prices. This is where they're going to ask you to fill out the cleanse, the sub-cleanse, or the ELINs are in J, but the cleanse and the sub-cleanse and what those mean. And with each one, there should be description. You know, CLIN number 1 means all of the services to do this, including such and such and such and such. They should be very clear on what they want you to include in that CLIN versus the next CLIN. C will always be your description or the specifications or the statements of work. I caution you here because a lot of contracting officers like to say, yeah, here's a brief description of the statement of work. Find the rest of it in attachment J. And I don't know why they do that, except that perhaps it's more convenient. Somebody typed it up or put it as an attachment. But often you'll have to go to section J to find out where the actual scope of work is. So again, understanding where it is and what you might be having to look for. But that's what you're going to price. And C is what's going to describe what it is they want you to do.
Mona,
Yes.
please repeat what provisions definition is.
I thought I had a slide on it. A provision is a term for the actual pricing. It's a hold on just a sec. If you give me 30 seconds, I'll get you a better definition. Because it's on the top of my head. It's going to be hold on just a second. I'm trying to, oh, there we go. I mean, I can explain it to you, but since an RFP is a request, the solicitation, blah, 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 clauses, from the legal perspective, oh, I guess I don't have it. Sorry. So let me explain it. Carrie, go ahead.
A provision is in the solicitation. It doesn't follow through to the contract. A provision provides information and instructions during the solicitation phase, but when the contract is actually awarded, it's not provided in the contract. Whereas a clause is in the solicitation and the contract. So they're telling you upfront in the solicitation, these are the clauses that apply. Once it's awarded, those clauses are in the contract. Provisions are not in the contract.
So provisions are there to instruct you as to what to make that will allow you to be qualified, what terms you have to meet in order to even bid on this. And perhaps a good example is in construction, you have a Buy American Act. And there's a provision that says my bid will include, all Buy American Act except for these things. It gives you an opportunity to say things that are not going to be covered. It's a requirement. I mean, it's a condition of my proposal. So it says you are going to have to comply with Buy American Act after award, but during this pricing and during this review, you have to tell us that whether or not your bid includes any of that. So it's a consideration before award. There's a matching clause on Buy American Act in the contract because after award, that will be enforced. So it's a term of how is your proposal prepared and what happens prior to award, and then the clauses are what happens after award. I mean, you have to consider all the clauses when you're pricing it, but it actually becomes a term and condition of your contract. Does that help? I'm trying to think of some of the other provisions off the top of my head. I think there's a provision that you can't be debarred. I think there's a provision that you have to state that you are not owned by a third world, some kind of foreign national company that is on our prohibited list. So a provision will say, I'm saying that it is a condition and I'm agreeing to it prior to award. Those provisions fall off because now they're no longer a part of your solicitation. If there is a corresponding requirement after award, there will be a matching clause, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you for going over that.
I apologize. I have a slide that in our detailed class, we go through that very much so, but I was trying to recall that off the top of my head. Must not have enough coffee yet, so, or caffeine. So reach out to us if you have any confusion about that. We'll get you that other slide. In services and supplies, then you're going to have sections like D and E. F is going to tell you, if it's supplies, how you're going to package it and market it or marketing it. You want to read that section very carefully because they are now requiring, barcoding and certain things. And the government is, if you ever think about how big they are, it's not IKEA. We can't find where that package goes if you aren't marking it correctly, and it'll just be rejected. Inspection and acceptance. Who's going to inspect it? Who's going to accept it? Where is it going to be inspected and accepted? Generally, it's at the point of destination mostly, or say if it's services at the location you're providing it. But there are a lot of provisions that say it could be turned over to DLA to inspect it. If you're shipping things overseas, perhaps it's at the port. So where it's going to be inspected and accepted is called out in section E. F is deliveries or performance. Again, where are you going to be required to deliver this work or do this work, and what is the performance of it? There's clauses, and I might remind you that there are clauses in each one of these sections. Packaging and marking has its own set of clauses. Inspection and acceptance has clauses that tell you what will happen, what happens if it's not acceptable, how long you have to correct it, things like that. So each of these sections have their own set of clauses. G is going to be your contract administration data. Who's going to administer it? Who's allowed to make changes to the contract? This generally will have your payment terms in it. It'll have anything that you're going to need to do to administer your contract. Does that have anything to do with you preparing a proposal? No, but it might make a difference on how you price it. So you want to be familiar where all this information is. Section H, I call it my homegrown clauses. Section H is special contract requirements. The government is being mandated to go away from this homegrown clauses or developing their own clauses and stick to the clauses that are already established in the FAR. But this is where an agency might have a unique requirement, something that they're calling out that is really contractual. It shouldn't be anything technical in there. It's just usually about what are my contractual terms. And maybe I want to say that instead of profit being whatever it is, I'm limiting to this. So you might find some homegrown clause, what I call homegrown clauses in section H. They are special contract requirements. Again, they should not be technical, but you want to just read them to make sure. Section I is going to be your FAR clauses. There are very strict requirements that say you cannot edit. There are some FAR clauses, let me clarify that. There are some FAR clauses that do require to be filled out. You would also be surprised at the number of clauses when you look in there that are to be filled out that are left blank. Matter of fact, they still have the brackets in there that say contracting officer needs to fill this out. So it is often overlooked, but there will be clauses that they are required to fill out. You need to read those. Those need to be in full text, which means they should be called out and they should be edited. Like how long do I have to perform it? Do I have LDs? Where am I going to find the FAR clauses? What do I do in the case of the protest? Who do I send it to? Those types of things. But again, you would be surprised how many are not filled out. The government is not, if it is not a fill-in, it is not allowed to be changed. That is one of the rules. The FAR clauses cannot be edited. You can't change the FAR clause just because they want to change it or they don't like what the general regulations say. But you will want to look in there. Most of the clauses will just be by reference. And this is where I would strongly encourage you to start printing those off. If you're going to deal with the government on a regular basis, you want to print those clauses off and read them and just kind of get a feel for what they say and what's required of you. I did have a client that said there's a FAR clause about an ethics requirement. And in there says you have to have a ethics program, a plan. You have to have all your employees sign it, that they've read it before they can even work on these. And, nobody had ever read that. They just knew that the term ethics was there. Yes, I'm a good company, but they didn't actually dive into it and figure out that there was basically a performance requirement in it, that they had to do something or maintain something. And that caught them off guard. Not that they couldn't recover, but it did catch them off guard. So print those out. You're going to do this on a regular basis. Get familiar with what those hidden terms are, okay? Of course, section J is a little catch-all, list of attachments. What you'll find in there are perhaps reference documents, You might find some old drawings, you might find the last order, or you might find some information about the facility, what the services are. There's lots of things that they could put in there for reference. You want to be careful about, this is probably one of the biggest arguments that I see in the government side, is that the government will include an attachment and expect that you are to comply with everything that's in that attachment. They're very good at attaching something that says, like, here's the pencil making criteria for all pencils, that'll ever be made for the government. And they're in this hidden document that has, 400 pages of what equates to a number 2 pencil. You want to make sure your list of attachments do not have hidden terms or hidden or watered down performance criteria that you are not paying attention to. A lot of times the government will take the statement of work and just make it an attachment. And again, that is beyond me as to why they do that, because there is a section. And so I guess my point is that even though there is this uniform contract format, contracting officers like to kind of pick and choose where they put theirs together. And so you just need to be aware of perhaps how to do a word search to find clauses versus provisions. I often find them in the wrong section. So if you have the time, be familiar with what you're supposed to be expecting, and then look for things that are out of normal. Here is where the key is for an RFP. Section K is going to be your reps and certs. In a construction contract, it's section 600. It's going to tell you what you have to certify, what's required, what you need to check. A lot of times it has your business size standards, large, small business, what your NAICS are, what's your UIC, all that information that is required either in your SAM registration or is now separate and required by this particular contract. You will always have a rep and certs, even if the only clause that is in there says, check, I certify that my SAM registration is up to date. They'll always be in there. So there will always be some kind of reps and certs you have to submit, even if it's just one box that you're checking. And that will have to go back with your price proposal. If you do not provide that with your price proposal, you will be ineligible for award and they may not come back. If there's 29 people that are bidding, they just toss you aside and move on to the next one. So make sure you understand that. And again, there's a corresponding section in construction. Sections L and M are 2 separate sections, but they tie very closely together. And that's what we're going to talk about today. L will be your instructions, conditions, and notices to offers and respondents. This is where it's going to tell you how many pages, how many binders, what sections go in which binder, how you have to separate your technical from your price proposal. They're 2 separate envelopes or 2 separate submittals because the government is not allowed to see the price if they're evaluating the technical. They will tell you, who to send it to, what date it has to be there. It will tell you how many pages, what size font you can use. So it's going to be very specific. It will tell you, I want your past performance, but I want your past performance to meet these conditions, okay? I want your pricing in this format. So this is the key right here is in K. What do you have to send in? What do you have to submit? It's going to tell you where in the price proposal to put the reps and certs. I'm sorry, in section L, did I say K? In section L, it's going to tell you how to put your price proposal together. And believe me, there's a format. They want you to follow the specific format when you're submitting it. And that's what you have to submit. M is just equally as important because it's going to tell you, okay, I see your technical proposal, tab 1 is past experience. This is what I'm going to evaluate it for. And literally this is what the checklist is. So I see your past performance submitted. You've done it in the right format. It's there. And this is what I'm checking it for. Is it within 5 years? Is it similar? Is it got, this type of work? And so they literally have a checklist that they're going down. You always want to make sure that you are preparing your technical proposal to match what they're evaluating it for, okay? And this is sometimes where proposers, offers make mistakes, especially if you're new at this. They'll say, well, I was told to do this, but where you're actually being evaluated and what that checklist is provided for you in M, and you want to make sure that the 2 are very cohesive, okay? So we're going to talk about that today. In a construction contract, that would be in section 100. Okay. So we will send you this PowerPoint. Keep this, this sheet if you are preparing for the government. We're going to talk about how to do a good technical proposal, regardless of if you're submitting it to the government. But if you're working with the government, keep this sheet handy so that you can understand that. Any questions? I can't see flashing hands, so we'll. Well, as soon as my computer starts working, we'll move forward. There we go. Really quickly, I want to just point out to you, because this is confusing to some people. I want to talk real quick about clauses versus provisions. See, right there it is. But numbering, how do you number? How do you tell what something is, or why is there a numbering system? It's very systematic. It's very definitive by the government. So anything that is a FAR clause, Federal Acquisition Regulation, that is a clause, is going to start out with 52. So any reference that you find in your contract that starts out with the number 52 is going to tell you that that is a Federal Acquisition Regulation. It is the mothership. It is the regulations that apply to all federal acquisitions. Okay. The 2 is just I don't know. Oops, I gotta quit. I'm playing with my mouse. The next number is going to have a 2 in front of it, and it's beyond me why there's a 2 or why that's there. But the next 2 numbers, 36, you can see, those reference the FAR section that this requirement is coming from. So in this case, if you happen to know the FAR, you know the part 36 is construction. So this clause is being driven by a requirement in the FAR under construction. If you see a 231, 31 is going to be your cost principles, or your, is it cost principles? That's what I think it is. The factors, you know, what's allowable, what's not allowable. Okay, that's where you're going to find out that you have to have a cost accounting system that can be audited. You can't keep switching back and forth. If you're a very big company, you have to have an approved cost accounting system, or CAS as they call it. If you don't have to be that big, you do have some regulations in Part 31 about how your cost accounting is set up and what you can be allowed to charge the government, and what you can't be allowed to charge the government. And we have a class on that all by itself, on cost principles and how you price things. The government's very specific that they don't pay for bad debt. They don't pay for liquor, alcohol. They don't, gambling. There's a lot of things that companies may carry. Those are probably the worst ones I can think of that shouldn't be referenced here. But if your company perhaps has bad debt, or you have allowed drinking, alcohol charges to be charged to your company, the government says, because we represent the taxpayers, we're not paying for that. And so you do have some allowable and unallowable things that are in your pricing. Part 31 is going to cover that. And we have a whole separate class on just how to price and what that consists of. Please let Kathy know if you're interested. If we get enough people interested, we'll do the class. So this little section right here will tell you what clause that is in. 215 would be part 15 is going to, or 225, I'm sorry, is special provisions. That's where your Buy American Act is and a few things like that. So this little number right here will always tell you what section of the FAR it is referring to. These are just sequential numbers, and they don't have any relevance other than the numbers, they just follow in sequence. If it has a 252, that means that the defense, the Department of Defense says, I hear you, FAR, I hear you, big government. I am going to make it even more stringent. Now, the rule here is they can make it more stringent. They can't make it less stringent. They can never undo what a FAR says. They can only enhance it. So for example, DFARS may say, FAR may say you're allowed profit on all your work. DFARS may say, but okay, I hear your profit, but you have to do this worksheet to, what's reasonable. And I'm going to add this worksheet to make sure that it's fair and reasonable. So they're making it more stringent, not less stringent. Of course, then each of the agencies, in this case, Naval Facilities Acquisition, says, I hear you, Department of Defense, and I hear you, overall government, but I'm going to even add more to it. So again, in this case, they require an accident prevention plan that tops all of these other ones that talk about this. So again, just understand your numbering system. Okay. Oh, I know that was quick. I know that was hopefully it gave you some insight as to how you need to get familiar with your solicitations. And now I want to talk where really the guts of this starts is follow the instructions without exception and help the reader. Technical proposals. Technical proposals, we're going to run through this list. Of course, they should be visually appealing and indestructible. There is nothing worse, and Mary Jo and Terry and I all have our horror stories of perhaps being the contracting officer that received 40 bids. You know, on the way to the evaluation room, you know, we dropped the whole stack of them and 3 of them came apart. You know, the binders busted open and now the pages are spilled all over the place. So you want them indestructible, primarily because the government doesn't want to really take the time and put it all back together in the format that you might have taken the care and time to do that. That doesn't happen very often, but it's happened enough that I think it's important to mention it, okay? You don't want to be discarded because somebody put your proposal back together in a manner that didn't get the information to the person that needed to see it and you were disqualified or not eligible for award because of their mistake, okay? So try to make it as indestructible as possible. I do spend a lot of time saying that this is not your marketing material. You're not selling it based on that, but at the same time, I'm telling you, you will make a first impression and it needs to be visually appealing. We cannot stress this enough. Use the exact same proposal, tab, paragraph, task number specified. If you are addressing a section that is 6.1.1 technical approach, you should have a paragraph number 6.1.1 marked technical approach. Don't rename it, don't renumber it, don't put any other information in it. The government may have multiple teams looking at different parts of your proposal. The small business plan is sent off to the small business person. The price proposal is sent off to the pricing people. And sometimes the technical board may comprise of more than just 1 or 2 teams, and they may be looking at different sections of your proposal. If they can't find it, if they can't go right to their section, they're not going to dig through the rest of the contract looking for it. So you want to make sure that it is exactly in the same format as they have asked for it. Mary Jo and I were assisting a client once that was during a debrief, we're told that they were disqualified because they didn't provide some safety information. And we all sat there with looks on our face and said, what do you mean we didn't provide it? It's on page 7, right in the middle of the page. And it wasn't, I'm not quite sure, we still believe that it was numbered correctly, but their point is they didn't see it. They didn't find it, they didn't see it. So their position is it's not their job to go through your proposal and find that information. It's your job to put it in a presentable format that they don't miss it. And we want to be very clear on that, okay? They do not read it cover to cover. They do not give you credit where credit is not due. Again, they have a checklist and their duty. The biggest fear for any contracting officer that's going through a solicitation is a bid protest. Bid protest will stop the whole process and delay everything. So, and bid protests, again, are going to be ruled on the fact of, and when GAO comes in and looks and they're going to say, government, did you do what you said you were going to do? And that is why after years and years and years of this, they have a checklist. They follow that checklist specifically. They put it in the contract. They told you that they're going to follow this checklist. We want you to follow that checklist. We want to make sure you mark every page. One of the things that small businesses that are just starting out also forget is there is a provision for you to allow you to mark your proposal proprietary, but there is very specific criteria about how you have to mark that. So when we want you to mark every page, make sure it's numbered, the page numbers are there, that your company name is there, headers, footers, you mark every page so that it cannot be, again, taken apart and not put back together correctly, but also be just aware that if you want to mark your proposal as proprietary, there is a specific format that you have to follow in order to do that. And of course, the PTAC, any of the counselors would be more than happy to help you walk through that. Keep every element short and to the point. We cannot emphasize this enough on everything that we even offer training on. Succinct, to the point. We're going to talk later on about words not to use, phrases not to use, okay? So we're gonna spend a little bit of time on that. Never, ever, ever exceed the page numbers. The government is quite adamant that if they told you 40 pages, when they get to page 41, they stop reading. I mean, I have seen teams actually pull those pages out and throw them away as if they didn't exist. So never, ever exceed the page numbers. On the flip side of that is you do not have to fill all of the page numbers. You don't, if they say 40 and you've only got 35 pages worth of information, that's fine too. And that's an awful lot. They usually don't get that high, but let's say you're allowed 20 pages and you want to end at 15. Do it in a manner that doesn't look like you ran out of things to say, okay? I mean, allow yourself the opportunity to include pictures or charts or something that help, but don't ever leave like 3 sentences on the very last page. The white space alone will give the indication that you ran out of things to say. So make the presentation, keep it short, to the point. You don't have to use all the pages, never go over the pages, but make sure that your pages look full, that you have a complete package is again, just a representation, an observation. Avoid narrative. And I know this is so contrary to what everybody learns or has been told, or when you start writing. Matter of fact, the government will be very clear. Sometimes they'll say, provide a narrative. We assume that that means just call it pages and pages of written. We want to bulletize wherever possible. And in this case, what we're telling you is, you may have the best proposal and it could be 15 pages of narrative. The problem is we have 49 other proposals that we're reading it. Contract officers, evaluation teams are human. They start to get bored. They start to scan. They start to miss key information. And we don't want that to happen. So how do you prevent that from happening? You bulletize, you change up the format, you keep the reader interested. You draw them in with bold headings or maybe a chart or maybe a sample of a flyer, and I've got an example here coming up. But bulletize wherever possible. Keep the words out of it, because again, we're telling you this from a reader's perspective. If you've read the same things over and over and over, they don't mean anything. And so what they're looking for is that key information that they're trying to get out of it. Everybody has said they're pleased to submit this proposal. Who wouldn't be? Okay, so what is it that they're really looking for? They are scanning past all that narrative to get to the point where they said, this is the information I want to know. I want to know who's authorized to negotiate for your company. If you've spent a paragraph doing a warm and fuzzy, giving them a bunch of, hey, we're glad to be here, they're going to scan past that. So again, bulletize wherever possible. I know that is so contrary to what even proposal writers will tell you. But the point is that they're scanning it. They're not looking at it. They didn't ask you for that. They want to know just the information, just the facts, ma'am. Never mirror back the requirement to the government, okay? And that follows right into quantify and qualify every requirement. The government, very adamant that if we tell you, you will deliver 3,000 pencils to this location within 60 days of receipt of the purchase order, you do not have to tell the government back, I will deliver 3,000 pencils at point A within 60 days. You don't have to tell them I will deliver on time. Those are what we call duh moments. Those are things that you have to do that whether you tell me you're going to do it or not. So the question is, how do I tell them? How do I convince them that they know I can do this? How do I lower their risk? Well, you're going to tell them how you're going to get them to that point. You're going to tell them how much you manufacture and what you have on stock, or how you're going to meet that requirement. They want to know the difference between someone having to manufacture from start 3,000 pencils from someone who already has them in stock and probably can deliver early. Okay, so again, you're quantifying and qualifying everything. Do you have experienced personnel? Well, what does experienced mean? You know, what does a large fleet of construction equipment mean? Okay, so, and how do we know that they're not being used on other jobs? So don't ever just mirror back the requirement to the government. They already know that. If they issue you a contract, you will be contractually bound to that, whether you told them you could do that or not. So think about it in terms of everything that you state back is quantify and qualify every requirement. And this is the second term I want you to keep. I will always be referring back to this: lower their risk. And how can you lower their risk? How can you be a lower risk to the government, meaning a higher probability of being selected? Is you quantify and qualify everything. You tell them how you're going to do it, not that you will do it, okay? And again, think about it in terms of not what you want to tell them, but what they want to hear. They know you're going to have to deliver that on time. And that's why they gave you those performance criteria. You know, they already know that you're going to be on call 24/7. They already know that you're going to deliver those many products. They already know that you have to construct the building within that period. That's their requirement. They don't need you to tell them that back, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those requirements. Do not make assumptions for the reader. Do not assume that the reader is technically as qualified to speak in engineering language. Don't assume that the reader knows your name or your company name as an incumbent. Don't assume that the reader is not smart enough to figure it out. So you have to find that middle ground that you of where the reader might be. You need to talk in terms that are technical to a certain degree, but understandable by the contracting officer who does not have any technical training, perhaps. Most likely they don't. They're business mindset. They have business degrees. They don't have technical qualifications. So how do you present the information that you do not have to then make assumptions that they understand you, okay? Don't make those assumptions, and don't ever assume that because you're the incumbent and because you've had contracts before, that the next contracting officer even knows who you are, or that your name and reputation alone will suffice or surpass everything you've presented in the technical proposal. We had, in my lifetime, there have been a couple incumbent contractors who had been doing the job for years that did not make the next cut because they actually failed to provide the required information. They didn't rate as high on their technical proposal evaluations. So break the flow of the document into columns for ease of reading. You know, add charts, add bullet points, add pictures as necessary and as allowed. Don't compromise. But again, sometimes a picture says 1,000 words. And again, how are you selling that to the government? How are you assuring them that you understand what it is they're talking about? And I've got a sample here coming up. Use the same elements and titles. We talked about that. If they call it technical approach, you call it technical approach. If it's management organization, you call it management. Even if you don't like their title, even if it's got well, you can correct typos, I guess. But make sure that you call it and number it exactly the way that they have, so that they can follow check by check, point by point, what you've been asked to do. Use bold headings, italic text, borders, color to separate. I've suggested that contractors or offers put, keywords in a different color, not necessarily bold, you're not screaming at them, but to draw attention to it. Those things are all going to catch the eye and keep them reading. Cut the monotony. Yes, that, make it easy for the reader to understand you. If it's enjoyable to them, they're going to go into it with probably a better approach on scoring you. But on the same token, use the specified font. If not, find a font that's easily readable. Do not go for these, hey, I want to be really creative today, so I'm going to do the whole thing in italics, or I like the, California bold because it does something. The government has gotten to the point where they will tell you the specific font to use, and they will tell you the specific font size to use, okay? So you may have to work around that. But if they don't tell you the font, try to keep it no smaller than 12 point if you can. You don't want, again, for it to be hard to read, okay? Ensure consistency. This is one of the things when you get to the red team review, did you use the same name over and over? Have you referred to, a lot of times companies will, I don't know why companies that have long names want to shorten them. You're selling your name brand. You're selling who you are. You don't want them to have to wonder, what does AMC mean? And is that a different firm than what because again, don't assume that they recognize that or recognize you. You want to make sure that they're following the bouncing ball, and you want to make sure that you've used consistent terminology, consistent acronyms, consistent names. And that's what a red team will do. And you can do that with a PDF search. One of the biggest things that we often discredit or will definitely makes our risk higher in our evaluation is bad cut and paste jobs. If you're bidding on a job and you just cut and paste from the last one and you didn't proof it well enough to take out the last project title, or the information is incorrect, a bad paste job will say to the government, I didn't put enough attention into this. How can I put enough attention into what you actually asked me to do? In construction, I used to say, if you can't read if you can't read the simple 12-page instructions on what I want you to fill out, how do I expect that you're going to follow my drawings to get my building built? So again, you're talking about risk. How are you selling yourself to the government? And what are you saying in almost everything that you say and do? So ensure consistency, but make sure that you've done that search, that if you are cutting and pasting, that you make sure that you go back and fix all of the correct titles. Add images, we've talked about that. Logos for company are not necessarily a requirement. It's just that you remember you're selling your company, you want to implant your name in their brain. You want to make sure that you are recognized. So, be loud and bold about that. Make sure that when you're referring to the company name in the text, that it isn't shortened, that we are doing what you need to do to get your point across. Okay. Here's a couple examples. In construction, one of the things that the government wants to know, and in any deliverable, I think, and even on a capability statement, we tell you this. They want to know what you do and how well you've done it, and how well you've done it is your past experience. So in most cases, they're going to ask you for, that's how the government determines it. Have you done this before? And if you've done it before, how well did you do it before? I mean, that's where all the risk is. If you haven't done this, if you haven't built this building, you haven't made pencils before, again, where's my risk? So most proposals will ask you for some kind of past experience. In this case, construction has these specific forms. And I don't know if you see this little black screen up here that I do, but if not, this little 10, this number 10, and this information is exactly off the form that the government told you to use. I mean, we're not making you guess. Here, there it is, number 10, there's a page before it, but number 10 says explain all this information. But if you look at this, yes, they've included a couple pictures, and yeah, you could read this, but you'll see that the same font up in the description, which doesn't distinguish it, is the same font that all this narrative is in. So you haven't really distinguished, like, here's my number 10, I'm giving it to you. I probably would have italicized that because that's their form, just to distinguish that that's not part of me, that's part of what you've asked for, and here's how I'm going to answer that. But you'll see that this is very much a narrative. You could read it, but again, the government has a checklist. The government has a checklist that says, I want to know that this project was done within the last 5 years. I want to know whether or not you have done any LEED Gold certification way down here. I want to know that the square footage is, within, this is the same size of building. There may be 4 or 5 things that they are saying that they're going to evaluate. They also, a lot of times it's within the project dollar, that you've done a project within 5 million and 10 million. And so they have a checklist. And one of the things that we've even encouraged is you could add that checklist, right here in the narrative that says, 10 to 5 years, yep. And again, you have to read this whole thing or maybe on the front page to figure out if it is within 10 years or the dollar amount or the criteria. What we offer is that this is a much better way. Look at all the space you freed up by getting rid of all of the narrative description and the run-on sentences, okay? This is definitely pointing right to exactly what kind of facility I built, what it included, where it was at, what kind of roof was on it, and it's very succinct. It's very to the point. It's giving them the description that they need to do. This is where I would have suggested that once you do this, I've cleaned it up. It's a lot easier to read. It's a lot easier to figure out what this information is I would have shortened this up and put a little checkbox over here that says, look, yes, it's within 5 years. Here's the date. Yes, it's within the $5 to $10 million. But here's the dollar amount. Yes, I put on a metal roof. If you give them the indication that you've checked those, it may prevent them from overlooking it, if that makes sense. If they read the checklist and say, well, yeah, it says you did a metal roof, and I didn't see it right away, they might go back and actually look for it, okay? So I think that helps in 2 ways. One, it's proving that you paid attention to what they are evaluating it for, and 2, you're helping yourself to make sure they don't miss something. I checked it, and if you don't agree with me, they will be inclined to go back and double check why they didn't see it. Okay, so I'm gonna, Mary Jo, Terry, do you guys have any, from experience, things that would make you want to, say, yeah, that works, or it didn't work, or it helped me, or it didn't help me?
I like that preferred proposal there, the one you have on the screen right now. It's really good.
It's much easier to read. And again, if there's 10 proposals sitting on the table and you're being in consideration and you're the only one that's put it in bullet format, I can guarantee you just got to tick up. Okay, it's easier to read. You are engaging. You're telling them, again, this is back to, you are telling them what they want to hear. not what you want to tell them. And so often it's lost in narrative, is how you want to tell them how great this building is and things like that. One of the things that you might also want to think about if you have space, sometimes what we encourage contractors to add are challenges you overcame. Okay, so let's say you had some unforeseen conditions and you worked around them. So again, you're trying to lower their risk. Yes, I've done this building, and these are some of the challenges that I ran into that I overcame. Okay, those are like little bonus points that if you have now space cleared up, you can even add a section, you know, challenges that we overcame. Again, government, I've done it. I know what your system is. I know how hard it is to work, you know, with clay soil or whatever. And this is giving them, again, lowering their risk because they can see that you've got the experience and that you know what, that you have been in these situations before. And they're trying to distinguish between a brand new firm coming in and a company that has done this and is very comfortable with their system. You know, it might be both small businesses and you both might be on equal footing, but I can tell you that that little push on lowering their risk is going to get you an A+ instead of just an A. Okay. The same thing with the narrative though. This happens to be a safety one that I help work on with a company. Again, safety is, again, factor 3, technical approach for safety. That's exactly the title that they put on it. That's exactly the title we're going to put on it. Make sure our paragraph numbers. 3.1 says, give me a narrative. I'm actually going to say 3.1 is the narrative. Look, this is where you can find what you asked me to give. And then here's what you're going to read. In this case, it's very easy in safety to say, I'm going to comply. You bet I'm going to meet all OSHA requirements. If you're in construction, you're going to say, yes, the EM 385 is the holy gospel of safety requirements. It's real easy to say, yeah, I'll follow OSHA. Yes, I'll be safe. Yeah, that's a duh moment. Again, duh, you have to be safe. We're requiring you to do that. But this is a company that said, a narrative, I'm going to tell you how hard construction is, that there are deaths. There's 20% of all the workplace deaths are you know, from construction. I understand that. So now what you're doing is you're taking you're lowering their risk because by them understanding, your level of understanding tells them you know what safety is about and that you take it serious. How do you take it serious? I qualify it, quantify it, okay? So then we can go into how they're going to operate it and how I'm going to do. But again, narrative starts to become boring. So you want to break it up. Is, hey, I tell you I have these posters and stuff. I can show you I have these posters. I'm going to post them. I have this special incentive, 10 rules for safety. These are how I enforce it on my employees. And here's the 10 things. And here's the poster I post. And I am going to make sure that my employees follow. This is my program. And that will help them understand, you understand safety. And again, you're communicating to the client that you understand safety, okay? And again, this may appear that you're telling them, I've got a great safety record. A great safety record only gets you to the next accident. They want to know how you are going to accomplish making it a safe work site. And you do that by telling them what you're going to do, not just that you're going to do it. You notice down here it says, in addition to the requirements of the EM 385 and OSHA, okay, I'll comply with OSHA. But this is what we expand on that. And that's what really makes it important. Same thing with, you know, they were allowed 2 pages. Again, we went to, you know, we put it in bullet format. We put it in column format. We used their exact titles. We made sure we didn't run over the page limit. But one of the things that I would caution that I know we did on this one, and it is a downfall, we're going to talk about that when we get to the 100 words not to use, is that there was a requirement that the subcontractor evaluate all their subcontractors. The government gets a little bit smarter every day, and they say, well, you have a safety program, prime contractor, but what about your subs, okay? And this could also apply in services and some of those other things. We see you prime, but what about your subs? Or how are you going to tie in your subs? How are you going to, even in deliveries of supplies, what company are you using to deliver them? You know, I mean, are you using your own workforce? Or are you using your own trucks? Or are you actually going to FedEx? They're very reliable. Those are things that are going to lower the client's risk, that you're using reputable firms and you know that that's reliable sources. Anyway, what happened in this case is the government said, tell us about what you're going to do when you have a sub come on site. I mean, you might have a perfect safety record, but what if the sub you bring on site has had a couple fatalities in the past? We don't want them on our site because we're not sure that, I mean, their work could be bad. And that reflects on the prime, it reflects on the government as a whole. Those get reported. So and in this case, we made a statement that therefore the ABC contractor will only employ subcontractors with matching safety culture and practices. And now in retrospect, when we put that in there, you look back on it, is that we've overcommitted. Now we have overcommitted that we will not hire anybody that has a bad safety record. And that may be not what we want. We want to be able to say, I need the flexibility for either price or, availability or there's a number of reasons I might have to use somebody that has less than desirable safety or delivery records or financial capabilities. And I need to be able to do that. I need the flexibility. So this is overcommitted that we will never hire anybody that does that. And what we should have done is said, we're going to evaluate it, but we're going to make sure that this all happens. And if their rate is lower than ours, or if their delivery standards aren't as high as ours, this is what we're going to do to make sure that you, the client, don't suffer. We're going to make sure we invest the time and energy into this to bring them up to par is basically what I'm saying. But by overcommitting that we will never hire anybody that has a late delivery record or an unsafe, evaluation or something is overcommitting, because now you can't bring them on. You're in violation of your own contract or your own agreement with the government. Okay. Thoughts, comments, suggestions? I can guarantee you that if I took all this out and gave you 2 pages of narrative, you would all fall asleep. This is a better way to present it. This gives them a lot of interesting information. Again, any kind of past performance where you can just limit it and not even talk about the words is going to be a better proposal. This is an A+ proposal. A++ would have been, again, on this one, if they had the little checklist here, that would have helped keep the government on track. This one, we could have made recommendations to make sure that we're not, overcommitting, because this would have been, somebody would have looked at that and said, you're never going to be able to do that. That would have been a reader saying, not everybody has as great a score as you. The reader is going to instantly say, I think you've overcommitted there. And again, that's going to move that risk needle one way or the other. Okay. Thoughts, comments? Okay. Here is, now, I've talked a lot, and here is an opportunity for us to put a little bit of discussion to practice here. This is a clip from an old RFP, an actual RFP. And we actually, I have some information about their proposal, and I'm going to compare the two and show you how some of the pitfalls that you fall into. In this case, another thing I want to draw your attention to is making sure that your proposal is complete and that it follows the same storyline from start to finish. You don't want to just have to pick up or have conflicting pieces of information, because again, even if a contracting officer or whoever your reader is reading it from cover to cover, and they start to see sections that are done by different people and they don't tell the same story, what the impression will be is that there's a disconnect even in your company. If there's a disconnect in your company, where's that risk meter going? It's starting to raise doubt. So again, the risk meter is starting to not go in your favor, it's going against you. So in this case, this RFP, this is a portion of it, had 2 requirements to talk about your organization and management. 6.1.1.1, and again, that's exactly what you should be seeing in the response of the proposal. They want a brief, provide a brief. I even love how the government terms it. What is brief? A brief but concise written summary of the organization and approach to management. The narrative shall address both, I added the emphasis, both the approach to managing the project, including the scope of work, and the approach to managing multiple projects located in remote areas. This is a contract proposal or an RFP for a MAC contract. It is for overseas, and they're going to be awarded a master MAC contract, and then they're going to be issued task orders against it to build different facilities, multiple projects in different areas. Okay. So they want to know, how are you going to, manage this job? And then how are you going to manage multiple projects located in remote areas? Okay. Describe the organizational resources of the company and how their resources will be utilized. Clearly describe all teaming and joint venture arrangements, including a clear description. And I love how the government's giving you a key here that they're going to evaluate. When they keep saying a clear description, and of course, now you're starting to talk about subjective terms. What is clear? What, and that is in the eye of the beholder. So again, they're kind of, they get to ask, but they don't have to be perfect either. A clear description of each firm's roles and responsibilities of the project, a copy of the teaming agreement or joint ventures if you have them. And that, of course, is not ever included in the page limit. Discuss any contractual arrangements that have been established, meaning have you reached out to any major subcontractors, suppliers, identify design team and describe the role of the design team during construction. Again, something the government's giving you clues as to where they have had problems before. And that sentence right there says, okay, we know you have a design team, but when during construction, how do those teams work together? How are you making sure that you have a cohesive team? And I can tell you that was written from people that just see the design team for 3 months, they go away, and then the construction contractor just goes, gung ho and doesn't pay any attention or require the design team come back and interface or act with them. So even in those types of projects, the contractor they're just not performing as a cohesive team, and the government says we're aware of that now. So anyway, identify your procedures for safety and quality control throughout the design and construction process. Discuss your ability to perform work in multiple project sites throughout the country. We're going to come back to that section. And what we're going to talk about right now is the next element. The next element, because you've read that now and you know kind of an idea of what they're looking for. Now, the next section says 6.1.1.2 organizational chart. Include a simple organizational chart illustrating the lines of communication within the proposed organization and the key personnel proposed for the specific project included in the scope of work. The chart should clearly depict the names or positions of key personnel, including the company owners, blah, 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 blah. Now, I do expect you to participate, so be prepared. We'll know who's awake here and who's not. This is what was submitted. Now, I want to see unmutes come off. What do you think about this chart? Does it meet the requirements of the proposal? And Mary Jo and Terry cannot answer.
Who's the owner?
Pardon?
I said, who's the owner?
Well, in this case, this would be the owner. Oh, I'm sorry, owner. U.S. government. Actually, Naval Facilities Engineering Command, I think Navy. This is for a job in China.
She's asking who the owner of the company is.
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
And there is a question. Does every page of your technical proposal get linked to and become a part of the contract?
Yes. Your technical proposal is your communication to the government, how you are going to do their requirements. Again, and that is one of the reasons that, if you deviate or you put exceptions in or you are not going to do something, it will generate conversation. Now, your technical proposal can never waive the requirements of the contract. So if the government didn't come back to you and correct you and say it's 30,000 pencils, not 29,000 pencils, there could be room for dispute and disagreement because your technical proposal is explaining back to the government, this is how you're going to do it. And this is your understanding of the scope of work. So yes, the two become part of the same. And your proposal is generally referenced in the acceptance of the contract. It usually says, per your contract or proposal dated such and such time. Now, I can't say that there's a lot of claims and protests and issues about that because we told you very clearly we were going to do something, but that's down the road. Terry.
A solicitation will state whether the technical proposal will become part of the awarded contract. So anybody to address, I think that was Kevin, to address that, it's important to read that in the solicitation which addresses whether the technical proposal becomes part of the contract or not.
And with that being said, though, I have done, again, my forte for a good portion of my career was in post-award and in construction. The question comes down to, and court cases have been won, is even if the government doesn't incorporate it, the government clearly understood what you were going to do and what you were going to provide. And so a lot of court cases, whether they're incorporated or not, and they should be, a lot of courts are saying, yes, government, they are incorporated, whether you did officially or not, because this was communication. The offeror told you what they were going to do and you did not correct them. You did not go back and tell them that was wrong. So you had carnal knowledge of what was going to happen. But again, that's a whole different case on rights and remedies and problems. Generally, they're incorporated, and the courts have said that even if they aren't incorporated, in some cases they are. The government had knowledge of what was going on. So in this case, anybody else, I mean, we could go back and say, you know, here's all the things that it was supposed to do, and I could tell you a whole bunch of things that I think are wrong with it. Lines of communication, generally lines of communication should have arrows saying whether the communication is flowing down or flowing up, who reports to who. Key personnel proposed. The chart should clearly depict the names and positions of key personnel, including company owners. You're right, they didn't do that. The lead design team, project managers, you know, they want names and positions. In some cases they did. But let's look at whether or not this is a break from all of the information that we just told them up here. Now, this information up here in the narrative is not only how you're going to manage the job, but how you're going to do it in multiple locations. And they want to know about organizational resources. Why would you spend a whole bunch of time in narrative talking about things that are not depicted on your flow chart? I mean, this is too simple. This is actually too simple, and it's incorrect. I do not, you know, in all fairness, if I was going to do this, and this is what I present to the class, this is a simple organizational chart. Now, usually the wheels come off the bus about this time and go, there's nothing simple about that chart. And I argue I can get that on half a page, you know? So simple is not a fold out. I can get this on half a page. It's just, I can take up almost the same space as the one before it, but look at all the information I've given them. I've told them, you know, who the company is and who the presidents or who the joint venture, who the managing partners are. I've told them that this joint venture is made up of these companies, and look at the background that these companies have. They have other business lines. They have other capabilities. And one of the requirements in the narrative is, how are you going to use the assets? You know, and then what they're looking for is reach back. You know, are you a brand new organization and we have no idea what, if you even have a company that your principals have any experience in this or not, or whether or not, you know, this is all the reach back. This is depth. This is saying that these companies, and you could even put on here established how many years these companies have been in business, and that's going to show depth. And it's going to show that this new joint venture can reach back to all of their parent companies with this experience and with this these services. And that right there should make the risk factor just, you know, go strongly in your favor. This company's favor that they have all of this background. It's also showing communication lines up and down. Now, interestingly enough, the government has asked for something that they cannot give them. We cannot, no matter how many ways we slice it, you cannot give them, because this is going to be a MAC task order, meaning multiple task orders. And they've asked you, how are you going to manage them in multiple areas? As you can see, we've told them, oh, we expect it. If at least you've visualized that we plan on having multiple jobs. But because you haven't told me what those jobs are, I don't know who my designer is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a mechanical or a civil guy. I don't know if this is a electrical project. I don't know if it's a combination of the both. So while the government has asked for names, we can't give it to them. Until you tell me what the projects are, I can't give it to you. But I have demonstrated that at least I recognize I'm going to have multiple jobs at multiple times. So this is kind of a win-lose. You know, we're showing you that we recognize it, but I can't give you the names of the superintendent. I don't even know if I'm going to get 3 jobs. I don't know if I'm going to have 10 jobs. I don't know which, I have to be able to assign my superintendents or my people based on the type of project, where their specialties are. So, this would have at least gotten them points that this is, that we recognize that, okay? Over here, this is bonus. This to me is what's going to get you big scoring points, because they tell you that they want you to know that the quality control manager, they did ask for that. Where's the quality control manager? Well, in the technical specs, the government says in most cases, the quality control manager, because this is something that they want to pass off inspection to basically a third party, but you can't have a third party. So this quality control manager can only work for the head cheese, the managing partner or the principal or the CEO or CFO, not CFO, CEO of the company. They want to make sure that the quality control manager is not overrun by the people doing the job. They don't want the quality control manager, they want him to be as independent and as self-sufficient as possible, that he has the right to shut down the job. This is something the government requires. If you know that, if you've read the technical specs and you show this over here, instead of just in line here, and it implies that he works for the project manager, but doesn't imply how he interfaces with the teams or the construction managers. So you've given yourself big points by saying, I understand, I understand that this guy has to work independently. So now you've taken an opportunity to say to the government, I understand what you're asking of me. And I'm also going to tell you, I've got some estimators, and I've got a chief safety guy in my company that's going to help the safety manager in the field. This is a simple organizational chart that tells the client what they want to hear, not what you want to tell them. And that's the subtle difference. Anybody got any comments, thoughts? I always get a lot of riots when I say that this is a simple organization chart.
Question for you.
Uh-huh.
What kind of program did you use to build that chart?
Oh, I use Excel.
Excel.
Yeah, and I'd be more than happy if you need it. I'd be more than happy to even send you this in Excel and you can move it around. I have not been able to master any other, and you'll see even here, because the way it printed, some of my lines are, but I have not been able to find any program that will allow me to move the blocks and stuff the way I want to do it. So I do all of my flow charts and all my organization charts in Excel.
Have you tried Visio?
Oh, see, I knew somebody was going to say, hey, if you use Control P, it works. I have not.
Yeah, Visio is a whole software package like Excel, but it's made by Microsoft and it's just for flow charting.
Yeah. And if I did this on a more regular basis, I do these onesie twosies. So that's good information to pass on. But I don't do it enough to invest in that. So, but good point. Any other comments, thoughts?
I think where I'm getting most lost in this, and I'm taking full, I'm listening to you as the reader and the judge of what's to be assessed based on this. When I look down at the different task orders and I hear the argument that we're creating an understanding that this will occur and what we will do when that occurs, I think I would be second guessing myself as to, am I opening up the fact that I've started something, but I really didn't explain enough detail because some of those details aren't known to me. So I'd get kind of in a busy, worried do loop. Am I giving them something that's actually going to be used against me?
Well, surprisingly, and let me see if I can go the right way here. Bear with me. This is a follow-on. The chart is a follow-on of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
My point here is the two should match. Now, in this narrative, they did ask, how will you address both the approach to managing the project, and that's that upper team management, and the approach to managing multiple projects located in remote areas. In your narrative, you're gonna, ideally, you've already said, I have 39 crews or teams. I have 14 superintendents that, work for me that will be assigned. You're trying to explain to them in quantity and qualifying how you're going to manage multiple jobs. And you're going to state in the narrative, because the projects are unknown, but my company is well versed in a civil, electrical, or whatever. And if I need a mechanical, I have established relationships with these firms or multiple firms that I can pull from. They want to know how you're going to be able to manage multiple projects. So right here, you've already read it. If you can't tell them that, the flow chart won't help you. But right here, you're going to have to explain to them, how are you going to manage multiple projects? And I can guarantee you that they're going to want an answer to that, because that's one of their biggest problems here is we have this MAC, and it's easy for the government. MACs and JOCs and anything that I can just keep throwing stuff at and not have to go out and resolicit each time. But I need to have some confidence that you're not going to fall flat on your face and leave me with 3 projects that can't get done. They want to know that if I got 10 projects, I've made it easy on myself, the government, by giving you this one contract, but you need to assure me that if I got 10 projects, you can do 10 projects. I don't want you to tell me you can do 4, because then the 6 that you can't do, I'm now already behind the power curve, and I got to go back out and resolicit to get that work done. So this is important. And again, that's knowing your client and why they're giving you the contract tool that they're giving you, or what they're asking for you, and right here, when I say if you just say to them, I can handle multiple projects, one, you don't know that because you don't know what you're getting, but they want to know how, and you're going to have to explain in quantity and quality how you're going to manage that. How many project teams, maybe it's experience, how many you've done in the past. We've handled up to 15 jobs at one time, over, the whole continent of China, because again, this project's in China. So somehow up here in the narrative, you're going to have to explain that. The chart in this case takes that story and says, I've explained you, I had to explain to you how I was going to do it. And this chart just simply carries that story forward. Okay. So those are key factors you're going to have to remember. Matter of fact, this chart, no matter how they explained how many projects they were going to do or how they were going to manage multiple projects, this chart doesn't even reflect that they understand that. Okay. So that's why I'm trying to pull these two together and say, if you literally just do this paragraph this way and the next paragraph without being a follow-on story, without connecting the dots, you're going to have conflict. And the evaluator is going to say, wait a minute, I don't see this. Because remember, they also know what you had to give them up here. See, again, describe teaming and joint venture agreements, contractual arrangements. How are you going to have your design team in the construction? You're going to have to have addressed all of this in the narrative to sell them that you can do it. You're going to have to sell them that with quantity and quality of the work you've either done before or how you're going to manage their jobs for them. And that's why this will become, whether it's incorporated by reference or not. If you told them I have 15 managers, well, they're going to assume you can handle any jobs they give you. Matter of fact, they're not going to give you a quantity. And they're going to say, my contract says I can give them all to you within the limits of within the limits up to 99 million. There's also some provisions back in the clauses that say you don't have to accept any task order over 1.5 million or this many in any one given day, I think, which is very interesting. I'll just wait till the next day to give you another 1.5 million. But everything here has to tie into here. And if there's a disconnect between these two, it's going to make your risk factor go up. They're going to say, I don't think you know what you're really talking about. I don't know which one of these to believe. I see a disconnect. And anytime you create disconnect or confusion or questions, that lowers your rating. Okay.
Thank you.
I hope that helps. And again, it's so construction oriented, it's sometimes hard for me to put it in perspective of a services contract. Supplies, it is very rare that you would have a technical proposal on just supplies. Commercial, usually they're for commercial items off the shelf, pencils. I don't need you to explain how you're going to make pencils. Pencils are readily available. So usually technical proposals come in services or construction, engineering, research and development, those type of contracts. So supply contracts wouldn't cover this. But one of the things that, again, from the reader's perspective, we have seen this a lot. You've gone into great depth to tell us what you're going to do. And in some cases, you may not have. You just mirrored back the requirements. Yes, we can handle any project you give us in any location. That isn't going to get you any points. That's going to rate you down because we're not even sure you understand how you're going to do it. You just promise you will. Okay. But how these two relate and how they build on each other is an A+ proposal. So you can also, you know, cover a lot of information. Maybe you've even covered the fact that you have a quality control over here separate. Maybe you save yourself space in the narrative. Maybe you can just show that on the org chart. But this organization chart has to match what you told them in the first word. Does that make sense? Anybody else got a question or? So again, I haven't necessarily, we've given you evidence or examples or demonstrated how you approach their requirements, how you write back to the client what they need to hear, what they need to see, how you're going to do the job. They already know that you're going to do the job because if you enter into a contract with them, you're going to do the job. You made an agreement to do the job. They want to pick you because they know how you're going to do it, to have the highest level of confidence that you present the lower risk, the lowest level of risk to the government. Okay. So once you've gone through that exercise, this is really the last part, or the finishing touch. This is generally what we'll put an A+ on your proposal, because this is where, if you don't do this step, you're not going to be as successful in you're not going to catch your own mistakes. That's the whole point, is that a writer never reads its own mistakes. You know, so you can't read, what you meant to say. The question is, did you get it on the paper the way you intended it for it to flow? Did you get the information out there that's correct? And all of the things that you're being evaluated for can be done on a checklist yourself, but you need an independent party to do that. Some firms actually invest in an independent review, a red team, what they call a red team. I know the PTAC does that service for you for the most part. They can help you look at your proposal. They can't write your proposal for you, but they can help look at it and compare it to the RFP and see if you've met those. So you're looking for that independent review. You've spent a lot of time and money doing it. It's just the finishing touch is that you invest in something, either your own, another team within your company. And if you're very small, I know that's hard to do. You know, you may be the owner, writer, and, worker all in the same time, but you can at least reach out to the PTAC and say, I'm getting ready to turn this in, and I believe it says everything I need to say. What do you think? You need some kind of editorial review on it. And so we give you this checklist, or I've developed this checklist. This is mine. I take full credit for its success or for its failures in its completeness. But here's a checklist that will help you go through, even if you have to do it yourself, how to separate it into just a review. And I have 3 steps kind of. I code them red, green, and blue, kind of like a stoplight, what's going to kill you, what's going to maybe get you a lower score, and what you might be able to get away with. And broke them into each of these criteria. Number 1, is it complete and consistent? Those are things that we're looking at. 2 is compliance and coherence, and we'll walk through each of these. And then 3, on correctness. And we're going to spend a little bit of time about some of the words not to use and how you can help yourself in a technical proposal. Even in any writing, we use the same philosophy when we talk to you about your capability statements. I believe it also can be used on resumes, even in marketing type material. The short, succinct bullets type of format, and getting rid of all the fluff words, writing to the client. Those are the key things that you want to take away. And again, when I'm writing to a client, regardless of what, or a potential client, no matter what the format is, whether it be my website or you're writing to the client, not what you want to do. I sometimes go into websites and I read all their accolades and all their awards and what they want to say about their company statements, all this. And really what you're trying to figure out is, what are your services and how can you help me? And that isn't, so again, you're looking at it from the perspective as, are you telling them what you want to tell them, or are you telling them what they want to hear? And I'm sure every business out there wants to attract clients. So you want to even look at your website and say, am I talking to myself, or am I really talking to my client? And recently on an alliance, it was a great opportunity for me to go through and look at some of the other sponsors and vendors and exhibitors there. and look at their websites. I did have an opportunity to do that and say which ones are trying to attract subcontractors and small businesses and which ones are just really talking about how big and beautiful they are. Okay, and that made a difference to me on what your product you're trying to sell. So let's go through this real quick. Read. Now I break each of these into what I call read and no read. One of the biggest problems that anybody has is you start to read. I myself, I'm guilty of this. I'll crack open something and I'll start reading it. And I'll forget to look for the things that I was, am I looking for consistency? Am I looking for the right acronym? I just start reading it and I get kind of lost in the whole storyline or the presentation and stop looking for the things I'm supposed to be looking for. So I definitely encourage you to do what I call read and no read. So no read, and we're very fortunate in today's environment, even with PDFs, you can do a lot of this with word search, just a word search, if I use the name correctly throughout, those type of things. I mean, in the old days, you did that, in my day, I should say, in the old days, you had to actually do that manually. Now you can PDF it and do a word search for the same, project title or the same. Matter of fact, when I'm cutting, editing, or cut and pasting on some things, you might even want to make sure you take out a client's name, or you may want to make sure that you take out certain references. So again, you have a search capability that's very capable of doing that quickly for you. So a checklist, and you should put together a checklist. If we were doing the full long day class, we would ask you to make a checklist. What has to happen? What is the criteria? You should develop a checklist to make sure that somebody can go through and say, check, you got the binders, check, you got the tabs, check, you got this section covered, check, you provided the joint venture agreement. You should have a checklist so that you don't forget something. But on that checklist, again, tabs, binders, paragraphs, title, page count. And again, this is no read. You go to each section. Is there 2 pages? Check, 2 pages. Is this limited to 15 pages? Check, 15 pages. So these are things that you need to do. And these are read because if you, again, go over the page count, you don't have the correct title or project or solicitation number, these things they'll just automatically stop reading them. So now this one, some of these are not general appearance, margins, font, are, again, font. Did they say a specific font? Is that happening? Margins are also something. It's interesting that sometimes how deep into the weeds we like to get. Are we checking your font? Are you using 0.75 margins instead of 1-inch margins? Are you trying to squeeze more into are you trying to break their rules by squeezing it in to get more content in without them finding out? And the government sometimes gets obsessed about checking for those. I know you're cheating. Let me measure the margins, whatever. Our whole point is don't even get into that situation. Put all in bullets, streamline, get rid of all the extra waste that is sucking up those pages, okay? So again, checking names, acronyms, and titles that you're very consistent. And then you can start to read, again, you're reading it from start to finish, and these are things you're checking for. These things, are very critical. These are some of the things that could get you bounced. And if you can't get it even read because you don't have the right binders or the page count or whatever, then you're not even being evaluated. The second step then, and again, each of these are kind of done in sequence. I mean, you can't do them all at once. You kind of have to go through and make sure you're doing this checklist, make sure that you're following the format, okay? There really is no read. Right now you're looking, this is really, okay, I've done all the review. I've looked, you've met all the requirements. The conditions are there, the page count, the folders, the binders, the correct names on it. Everything's good to go. Now you're going to start to read it. Is the required information addressed? Again, you should have a checklist. Are we addressing these? Do they say certain dollar amounts? Can we pass that test? Okay. Here's the big one. State how, not what. Do not mirror back. You should be having someone, again, looking at it independently. Did you explain how you were going to do those jobs in multiple countries or multiple locations, remote locations, multiple jobs or remote locations? Did we say how we were going to do that, not just that we mirrored back? Is the information relevant? Are the statements quantified or qualified wherever possible? And this is one of the hardest things for people to do when we ask them is how do you qualify that? How do you quantify that? And we have an example here in a minute that's going to really make that more evident. You want to tell a story. And again, remember I talked about you want that middle ground. You don't want it too technical. You want to be able to talk to the technical people, but you also want to be able to convey the story to the non-technical people. You don't want to dumb it down so much that the technical people say you're just dabbling in this. So you got to find that right level of talking to both parties, because while the technical people may be looking at one section, the contracting officer will also be looking at that section, or maybe looking at how they wrote it up to make sure that it follows the checklist. And again, they're following the checklist. You want to make sure the sections build on each other without contradiction. I kind of gave you that example where here's the narrative that's requiring all this information. Here's the flow chart. Did we tell this consistent story without a conflict? The minute you offer conflict, you know, that little meter goes down, your evaluation goes down, and the government will write it up as a problem. Now, the government has in their own checklist a series of evaluation ratings, more or less, but they also say, is this a deficiency? You know, is this a minor discrepancy? Deficiencies cannot be corrected. For example, if you do not meet the past performance criteria, you can't fix past performance. You know, it's uncorrectable. You can't, I mean, you might have forgotten something, but in the government's mind is if you don't have the past performance, you don't have it. You can't correct that. Deficiency is usually non-correctable. I'm trying to think of the word off the top of my head now. I can't. There may be an element, and gosh, it's off the top of my head now. I've forgotten. Sorry. It may be a problem or a
Weakness.
Deficiencies are not correctable.
Weaknesses and deficiencies.
Weaknesses. Thank you, Terry. I knew I had it. I knew it wasn't. My brain is weakness today. So it could have a weakness. They could say, we don't think you really addressed how you're going to handle multiple jobs in remote locations. That may be able to be corrected. You know, you can ask for more information. Now the government gets to decide on weaknesses, how severe those are. And at the end of the day, they'll look at all of them and say, if I have enough people that have no weaknesses, the weaknesses never get asked. But if I don't have enough people or I want to address those weaknesses, that's when they open up discussions with you. But deficiencies are something that they say, we don't think you can correct that. You can't correct it. There's no sense in going into discussions with you. Okay. So again, they're looking for this, again, telling the story and translating the use of build on each other without contradiction. In the example that I showed you, I think there's enough of a contradiction that they might have said this is a weakness and we need to have this clarified. Your chart doesn't depict what we ask you to depict. Now it can be corrected, you can fix that. So it might be a weakness, okay? But again, this is what you're reading for. You're looking for the story builds and doesn't cause conflict upon each section, okay? Understandability without explanation. The government's very clear that they are very busy. They have not enough time on their plate and they do not like to enter into discussions. They like to get all the proposals, read them and pick a winner without ever talking to you. So one, they are very clear in most of their RFPs that the government reserves the right to award without discussions, and you are to present your best proposal, and you are to present it without the assumption that we will talk to you to clarify any deficiencies, okay? So of course you'll learn those lessons, and we always try to encourage you, if you aren't successful, that you always, always, always ask for a debrief. Because the debrief will tell you where they found your weaknesses, what they didn't like. And again, it may not be easy to hear and you may disagree with them, but here's the point again. They're the client and they're telling you what they did not see or what they did not like or what you did not tell them, okay? And you need to take that information and build on it next time if you're not successful. So, and then the ease of reading. So use this checklist to make sure that you're addressing those points. The third is really, go ahead.
Quick question.
Uh-huh.
I know you're addressing strictly government. Most of my background is actually more on the private side. So I'm really entertained by, you know, a lot of your material. And I'm taking full, you know, account of it. But one thing about asking for a debrief, are they required? And then if it's such a big, diverse team, is there a right way to ask for it? Because you might hear from one person, but you're not hearing from the technical team or the other teams you've mentioned.
If you are doing, I know I can speak to the government side of it, and I'm going to assume that some of like the state and local governments follow similar approaches. For the federal government, you are offered a debrief with your notice. If you get a notice that says you were not selected, you have 3 days to ask for, is it 3 or 5 days to ask for? 3 days, you have 3 days to request a debrief. And the debrief will be conducted by the source selection authority, which is the contracting officer. The contracting officer, because the technical people will write a report and the price people will write a report, the price evaluation team, technical evaluation team, the two parties never meet until it goes to one individual who compares both of them. So then they take that evaluation and say who rated the highest for technical or who is the lowest if it's low price technically acceptable, and they marry it together and they come out with somebody that's on top. And the only person that sees that is the source selection authority.
Okay,
Your debrief is with that individual, and they may have called in the technical people and the price people, but they will have, I kid you not, a full detailed written, probably a 30-page report about why you were or were not selected. And they will basically give you the information out of that report that they can. So you'll be one individual, you'll have 3 days to ask for it. I don't know, on private sector, of course, they can pick whoever they want when they want.
right.
There's no protestable grounds once you're in private sector. Now, I'm not saying that, I think that some of this is key information you can take away with writing a good proposal, because I think that risk is involved with any party, with any client. And even when I have work done at my house, I look at the risk. I might have a couple of people out there, but who do I trust? Who do I really want? So I believe a lot of this can apply to that. But in terms of the government, you are offered one. They are required to offer you one, but you have to request it within a certain period of time.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, there are certain procurements where the agency does not have to give you a debrief. For the most part, though, more and more, the Congress is saying that agencies need to provide a debrief. Also, the Federal Acquisition Regulation allows the agency to either give you a written debrief, a telephone debrief, or an in-person debrief. And it is contracting officers' preference of how they want to provide that. And also, one last thing, even if you are the successful offer and get the contract awarded to you, ask for a debrief.
Yeah. And in this case, the government's going to be very cautious. I kid you not. You ask for a debrief and, all kinds of flags go up in walls, and they're because their biggest concern is there's going to be a protest, and because that just stops the entire thing until, the protest is resolved. And it could be 30 days, it could be 90 days, it could be 6 months before that protest is resolved and everything is on hold. So they're very susceptible and weary of protests. Our concern is you probably already know when if you're on a government contract and if you got you weren't selected letter, they're going to tell you who was selected and they're going to tell you what the price was. So you're going to very quickly see I wasn't low, or if I was low, that, now I'm really concerned I was low. And why didn't you pick me? And I might have a good grounds for protest. But you're going to quickly be able to realize where you fell. We encourage the request for debrief, regardless of whether you think you should have won or not, just to help in the future with how you write your proposals better next time. And if you were high or you were way out of the ballpark, again, I would take the opportunity to have the debrief on the technical proposal. Even though you had no chance of winning and you need to sharpen your pencil if that's where you want to be. But how do you write a better technical proposal? Always take them up on free criticism or critiques. So, okay.
Also, for Kevin's benefit and the others, in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, it states what a contracting officer must tell you at a minimum. There are things that they can't tell you, as Mona mentioned, but there are the basic things that they must tell you. So if they eliminate something during your debrief, you can ask for it because they have to provide it.
And of course, we have contractors that we tell them we can't tell them that, but they'll ask anyway, what was my price? How many were below me? How many were below, above me? they can't tell you those things, but contractors ask anyway, because you don't go to jail for it. We'll always ask and see if they'll slip up. But you also are at liberty to ask them, and I think it's well received, how could I do better? You know, that is free information that generally they're not restricted from telling you, and it generally is very subjective, you know, like maybe, and I have been willing to do it in the past, as long as I'm not violating any rules, and the contractor says, how can I get better at this? Where, you know, I hear what you're saying, but how, what, you know, what would be a better presentation, or what do you think? And I would be prepared to ask those. You know, you've already lost, you know, assuming that you're in that situation. That's unfortunate, but a lot of people, it's a very competitive market, and you're going to lose some of them, or some of the bids, or some of the jobs. But always ask how I can get better next time. And I think that they're generally willing to help you with that. As long as you don't ask, well, what did the other guy do? You know, what did the other guy say? You know, hey, can I see the other guy's proposal? Well, you know what the answer to that is already. So don't offend them, you know, and if you don't offend them, then they give you really good advice. So the last thing you want to check for, again, is you've kind of done these separate reviews, these separate stages. You've got these separate checklists going on. You know, I've done all this correctly. Is what is the green light area, I call it. You probably won't get rated down for it, but it's definitely not making it an A+. Spell check. You know, you would be surprised. Again, because we're reading, we have nothing to do but be critical of the fact that you can't spell, or that you didn't even run spell check. And I kid you not, if you're reading something that has obvious errors that would have been caught by spell check, that's the first impression somebody's going to get, is if you didn't take the time to do that, you aren't invested in this. Again, they're looking for your commitment level. Grammar check. You know, I swear I am not the best grammatical reader or writer in the world, so I always appreciate somebody taking a look at what I've written. I know what I meant to say, but I didn't always say that. We're going to talk about this 100 words not to use, or phrases not to use, and I believe that this is global. I believe that these can be applied no matter what. As a matter of fact, I got the list off the internet, had nothing to do with technical proposal writing, okay? The use of white space and balance of type, use of bullets. This is something that we often comment even on your capability statements. There is a subliminal message that if there's a lot of white space, it doesn't necessarily just say, hey, that's a nice border. A lot of white space means I ran out of things to say, or I didn't organize my thoughts well enough. So again, it's about presentation, but you're sending kind of a subtle message that I ran out of things to say. There's this big empty spot, you know. So as much as you can, try to fill the pages, try to add pictures, try to add what you can to balance it out to make a good presentation, so that there's no negative opinions formed about what you've done. And that's just, this is now purely from a reader's perspective, some minor nitpicky advice here, okay? But I would say your professional appearance of how you write it is a representation. No matter what you're presenting, you are representing your company, and how do you want to represent that company? You know, your professional appearance in your writing, again, spell check, it's gonna say how professional your firm is and how attentive you are, and that is important, okay? Again, this is a no read. You could do that just by running spell check on it, you know, or looking at the white space without even reading it. And when you read it, you know, is there an ease of reading? I am amazed at how many arguments I get into with people that say, you know, commas, 2 spaces after a period is not criminal. Matter of fact, it helps break up the reading. It says take a breath. You know, if I could get away with 3, sometimes I would, because I'm trying to not to make this just one big read, you know, one long sentence in a paragraph with run-on sentences. So it's ease of reading, and there is not going to be any grammar checks. I mean, if you put 3 spaces to make your point, nobody's going to knock you down for that. But if you didn't, and everything's running together and they can't even make heads or tail of it, they're going to start scanning it. They're going to start just skipping key information, okay? I have been told on a number of times that commas are free. Please use them appropriately and often. I am a terrible violator of that. And so I do appreciate having someone that has a little bit more grammatical experience than me, except we do argue about the period. So that's you. And maximum use of space. We talked about that. So any questions, thoughts, use these checklists if they help. We're going to talk about now words not to use, okay? Yes, Carrie.
Before we start this page, I see there's a question from Ryan, and hopefully he's got an answer. Or Ryan, are you still making furious notes? Anyway, so the presentation is being recorded, so it will be available. And I don't know about the availability of the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, Kathy will send out the PowerPoint. I've made a couple changes on this particular one. As a matter of fact, the page numbers don't match up because I did this similar presentation at Alliance. It was much shorter time period.
Okay,
I will get the package to Kathy. Kathy will send it out to all attendees.
okay, Ryan, so you don't have to take copious notes anymore.
And I apologize, because I'm using my screen, it doesn't show me the comments column, and I can't figure out how to make that happen. So feel free to interject or interrupt. So, okay, words to avoid. Now, in technical proposal writing, these are critical, and these will make you start to question your own writing skills. But again, this can be applied whether it be a government job, whether it be a private job, whether it be a resume, whether it be a technical proposal. These are general words to avoid, and the meaning, some of the, one, they take up space, and two, some of them have commitments or statements that give a negative opinion. So crutch words, these are samples of words that are given when the writer doesn't know what to say. Okay, I don't really understand your requirement. This, and I know I think I have some proposal writing people on the line. This is generally where we kind of go to blows, okay? Because proposal writers can make you look good, but proposal writers need to know what your job is. They need to know how your company runs. And when they don't know that, when you have failed them there, if you've employed a proposal writer, you have failed them if they have to start filling in with crutch words because they don't know. It may not be their area of expertise. They're helping you present something, but they don't know what your company is. And we generally, and Terry and Mary Jo here, of course, could interject, I can tell when somebody's had a proposal writer and there's been a disconnect between the company that is presenting and the proposal writer. I can tell the proposal writer doesn't know the company, and that is not the best face to be putting forward. So if you're going to hire a proposal writer, do yourself and them justice. Make sure you're working with them closely and at all times, because if not, they're going to have to fill in. And when they start filling in, the reader knows that. They know that you're not speaking from your company, you're speaking through another company who doesn't really know what you are going to do, and that cannot get you high points. So that's what leads us into crutch words. It's used when the writer, oops, I keep forgetting to do this, sorry. When the writer doesn't know what to say, like, we understand your requirements. Well, no, you don't, because you wouldn't say that. You would just define them. You would tell them how. Again, quantity, qualify or quantify. How are you going to do it? Not that you do it. When you say things like as necessary or within the time frame, again, we're going to deliver within the time frame identified, and we have seen that. I mean, this is not stuff we're making up. I mean, this is a separate. This has nothing to do with anything that I know from the government, but we have seen this. I mean, we can all attest that we have seen this and read this. We're going to deliver within the time frame stated. Again, to me, that's a duh. You're going to, because the contract requires it. So don't waste time or space doing this. Full service organization. I remember this is probably getting kind of old, but the old storefront, ISO 9000, things that you use buzzwords that are crutch words. It doesn't really understand it. Okay. Weak, timid words. You want to definitely stay away from we believe, we think, we feel, we strive, we'll attempt to do your services. Well, that's like a no-brainer. That's if you're going to attempt it, next. So we intend to do something. Might, may, and can are very big words. So you don't want any weak, timid words. You do not want to ever say we believe this is what you want, or we think we're the right fit for you. You don't get to think here. The reader gets to think for themselves. So you just be careful there. Boasting words, categories, exaggerate or overstate facts. Now this is critical because these are delivery traps. And I say this because let's say we're using, I don't know, this is really old, best of the breed tools. I didn't know you could breed tools. So I'm not sure that, term is even right. I should take it out of here. But let's use state-of-the-art technology, okay? And you may be boasting, we have state-of-the-art technology. Here's the question. As compared to what? Or based on who? I mean, who's going to decide what state-of-the-art technology is? Now, the reader who is going to employ you to do this believes that state-of-the-art of technology is as of today. Okay, we're going to expect the best that there is today. You may say state-of-the-art was, well, 6 months ago, after, especially in computers. You know, okay, I had state-of-the-art equipment, but it's 6 months old. Well, you are no longer state-of-the-art, you know. So you want to stay away from delivery traps like that. Anything that's state-of-the-art, leaders in the, experts, we guarantee, we're uniquely qualified. Those are all boastful words that are very subjective and in the eye of the beholder require higher level than you may be able to give them. And you may be overcommitting to something that you cannot, in their eyes, you will not be able to provide. And I can guarantee you that a lot of proposals talk about state-of-the-art technology or state-of-the-art equipment or, you know, those types of things. And that is over-promising. They do not have any clue that our interpretation of what you're going to give us versus what you think you're going to give them are totally different. So then the next category is vague and useless words. I swear, and I know you all, I wish I could see your faces. If we were in the class, everybody would just hang their head low because every proposal has ever been submitted. Even resumes say, we are pleased to submit this proposal. You know, I am excited to submit this resume. And when you've read this statement 40 times, I often used to joke that I would hire the company that said, I'm not really excited about this. My boss made me do it. You know, we need the work because we're hungry. Those are truthful. I mean, not that you should say them, but this, we are pleased to submit this proposal is a duh moment. Yeah, you gave it to me. You want my work. You want my money. So these are all words that are vague and useless. And they may seem appropriate to you. Imagine reading these 40 times or 50 times in proposals. It does get to be like, we don't believe you. We are enthusiastic about this work. You never want to talk about it enthusiastic. We think we're the right fit. You know, this is not a marriage proposal. This is not, wedding announcements where you put your name and the client's name on the top of a letterhead and say, don't we look good together? You know, we're the right fit for you. Those are vague and useless words. We haven't determined we're the right fit for each other. I haven't accepted the proposal yet. You don't get to publish wedding announcements. Okay, so those things are things you want to watch out for. We are committed to top quality. We are looking forward to working with you. Those are vague and useless words. And while they seem appropriate, that's old school. I'm telling you, it's old school. That was what we used to do. Please and thank you, and we're excited. No, you can just leave those off and not have offended anybody. You know, when they ask you for some information, they're asking for something. You're going to give it to them regardless, right? If you're playing. So they only want the information that they've asked for. I mean, don't be rude, but you don't have to blow smoke either. Okay? Redundant words. This has even helped me. Actual experience, past history. History is history. Planning is advanced, of course. So again, they're giving you, go through and clean up any redundant words. Those redundant words are taking up space. They're boring the reader, and it's making the sentences too long and uneventful. They're not factual. They're just run-on words. Okay. Mirroring statements. We talked about that in great detail. You never want to tell the client what you want to tell them. You want to tell them what they want to hear. Never mirror back. You need to tell them how. You need to quantify or qualify. If you were applying for a job, and I'm going to really stretch way back here, and I apologize, but I shouldn't just say if I was applying for a receptionist position that I can type. I need to tell them how fast I can type, or what I am used to doing, or what programs I can actually run on the computers now. That's what key information for a lot of companies looking for people now is what programs have you worked with? If you're hiring an accountant, what kind of accountant programs have you worked with? Not just that you use automated programs. So again, don't mirror back the statement. Tell them something about how you're going to do that. Unnecessary qualifiers. Absolutely certain. It goes without saying. Now and again. Some of these are old. Needless to say. Seamless operation. We talked about that. Just unnecessary qualifiers. Again, if you start chopping out these words and sentences, you're going to find the sentences are condensed. You're going to end up almost with bullets, and that's what our goal here is. Slang, I don't see that as much now. These are kind of old, we're going to hit the ground running, I don't know where they get this rolling out the red carpet with seasoned managers. That again, they pulled these off of samples, but I'm sure that maybe that comes from different types of services products or something. Then you have this whole category of legal words. Assure, insure, and insure are, totally different things. And the difference between may and shall, you'll find that the government is very clear. They don't ever use the word may. May is not in the government contract anywhere. Well, the government may do something, but you shall always do something, okay? Shall is contractual. It's not an option of may. You may or may not do it. You shall do it. The government's very key on making sure that may is never in the contract for the contractor. And you want to write back in your proposal. You never want to say, we may do that. Because again, that's gonna make that risk meter move. And should, you never want to say we should do something because it makes you question whether or not you're going to do it at all. Okay. Almost done here. Needlessly long words. Here's a whole list of needlessly long words. Now, I personally object to irregardless. I think it's a sexy word to get my point across. But again, it is needlessly long. And I constantly have to correct myself on that one. So again, here's the samples of needlessly long words. And when you're reading something, again, this is that red team, you may not read that if you're just reading it for content. You may want somebody just to go through and look for those words and scratch them out. Hidden verbs. Again, I often get critiqued on my writing, which I appreciate so much because again, I'm not the most grammatically astute individual, but I do have the thoughts that I get them out there, and I love to have someone else shorten them up and tell me what I really need to take out to make my point. So now, if you'll bear with me just one moment, we have a little bit of time, so I want to, let's see if this is the right one. I want to take a look at this is, remember the factors that we were talking about, that 6.111 and 6.1112 in the proposal. This is actually a page, of course, names change, protect the innocent, out of the organization management. This is the response that was given. And I'd like you, just before I show you the answers, I'd like you to take a look at, if you remember, and you recall, and it's hard, this is why it's hard to do this virtually, is if you remember some of the things that they were looking for in the narrative, and when you start to read this, I want you to highlight, as if you're doing a red team, I want you to highlight things that are unnecessary or not related or too much information or anything that you might think is just not helping sell the point here. Now, we've talked about words not to use. And what I'd like you to do is just take a moment and read through this and see if you can pick out things that are questionable. And I'm not going to kill you here with a long pause period because I hate silence myself, but I do want you to kind of take a glimpse at this before I tell you what my opinion is of this. And again, keeping in mind the 6.1.1 is give us a narrative on how you're going to reach back, what your company's made of, how you're going to manage these jobs, what your organization look like. And this is the response. And I guess I'm asking, do you think that this will fly or do you think this won't fly? Of course, we already know it's not going to fly because I've got comments. But and I'll scroll down here a little bit.
Well, looking for input, I'll just add or offer. This is very wordy. It can be bulletized. It certainly was clarified greatly with that org chart you showed us. And then I'm noticing a lot of the words to avoid that you've coached us on.
Yes. This is, actually this was, I'm not even quite sure how we ended up with this sample. It might have been at one time a PTAC client or something in the past. And it kind of formed a lot of the basis for how we present this class. And, you know, it did break a lot of those rules. And here's a clip out of it, and I've got a couple clips here, you know, but even on that, you know, here's again where the company has shortened their name. Now, in the past, in the letter, it was hard to tell on this letter what company they were actually presenting. And because it should have tied into the org chart when they were talking about them, it's real easy for the reader to figure out, we're talking about different companies here. How do they all relate? Okay, so if you remember this, we've got an overview of Anderson Hill Construction. And we tell you how it's made up of all these other information. We have an AHA that we're going to use. Here's something about Hill Works, and I'm not sure, you know, again, how Hill works. All this information could have been presented in the org chart. You know, the company showing the background. Oh, excuse me. I'm not quite sure why you need to put your federal ELIN number in there. I don't think it matters that they're a nonprofit supporting organization. But again, all of this information, you're wasting space in the narrative. Plus, you're confusing the reader. Again, you believe you understand this, but Anderson Hill Construction, and now we got Hill Works, and now we've got other names brought in here, and now we have John Anderson Inc., and now we have an overview of John Anderson Inc., and it's hard to tell who's submitting this proposal. And I can guarantee you that the readers are just about tuned out now because there's just too much information and it's too confusing. You think you've explained the family tree here, but I can guarantee you that nobody's reading this going, who's proposing on this job? And the information that they presented has nothing to do with how they'll manage this job. Okay, so you've got this great family tree and all the great things that they've done as a nonprofit, and that they have experienced, motivated, and successful entrepreneurs. You know, we collaborate, we do this. This has nothing to do, again, with the job that I'm asking you to bid on. You know, you've given us this great story, but this is, to me, one of the best examples of how a company wanted to tell you what they wanted you to know, but it has nothing to do with what you asked for. And this will not get an A+. Matter of fact, I keep swearing I'm going to go back and figure out if they got the contract or not. Okay. Here, believe it or not, here is that cutting edge evidence-based programs. You know, it's just filled with things that are, again, nothing to do with how I'm going to manage the job. Oh, we have yet another entity that we're going to have an overview of. Okay. You know, one of the largest, oldest, and most reputable international development organizations, I swear to you, the most reputable compared to who? Compared to what? You know, that is your position. I don't know how you quantify or qualify that, but how can you just get away with saying that we're the most reputable? That maybe off of your followers on Facebook, I don't know, but this is not relevant information, okay? Here's world-class programs. I swear to you, these are in this proposal, okay? Now, here's a key part is that as a part of our mission to help Chinese develop its infrastructure, this is not a world peace program here. I'm the government and I'm gonna pay you to build some clinics in China. I don't know if I care how you're really helping the China economy. That's not telling me, that's not convincing me that you can build my project. It's convincing me you have a good heart. But again, we've got the wrong information going here, okay? So again, here's some of that, you know, we've shortened the acronym. We've successfully managed. Well, what does successfully manage mean? Have you quantified that, qualified that? Have you told me how many, you know, that you've gotten through duration? And design construction of numerous projects. What does numerous mean? How many projects, okay? Ranging from modest renovations to replacement of general hospitals, clinics, schools, and homes. What is modest? Are you talking $100,000 jobs? Or are you talking $1 million jobs? You know, what is modest renovations to, you know, to total replacements? This is where you can give dollar values. This is where you can give examples. Again, you're trying to tell them how and what, not just leave them guessing. The fact that you've built these things does not tell anything about your company or your success, and it does not lower the client's risk that you can do this job. Again, this is information that's just superfluous. AHA, again, I discourage I think you can take out all these buzzwords and put your full company name in here so it's not confusing who's bidding this job. Both develops critical healthcare infrastructure and trains Chinese engineers and project managers. You are now saying that your company mission is different from what I'm asking you to do. Okay, you might have a program that says you want to train these Chinese engineers and project managers. This is taxpayer dollars that are going into this project. I'm not sure that the taxpayers really are interested in you training these people. They're interested in getting the infrastructure in. So again, are you speaking to your client appropriately? Are you giving them the information, or are you giving them too much? Working closely with local government. Well, that's a duh statement. I mean, if we tell you to build in this area, you know, you are going to have to work with them. You're required. The FAR clauses say you have to comply with them and pay local taxes and comply with local regulations. We develop programs. We oversee design consultants during the design process. This doesn't tell me how you've engaged them. Maybe it would be nice if you'd say we have this, you know, like basically an RFI form. We ask questions, we do monthly, weekly meetings with the designer. How do you work them into the design process and construction? I love this one. We manage the construction of the project from inception to completion. I really want to know who would ever tell the government we have not gone to completion. You know, we just gave up in the middle of it. We decided we didn't want to finish it. So again, why are you stating that we'll take it to completion? That's a dumb moment, okay? Oops. Including procurement of equipment and furnishings. Again, that's what the contract requires you to do. Why have you not told me how you're going to do that? Now here are this whole thing, successful project experience. After all this fluff, you get down to here, it says AHA has managed over 107 million worth of infrastructure for the past 37 years. That is a qualitative and quantitative statement. That is the only key element all of here that says what successful project experience has been. Okay. Now, in one of my classes, somebody said, well, if you divide that out, that's like $2 million a year. That's not really big experience. But that's not a judgment call. That's just to say this is the first time that this company has said something that is meaningful. Okay. This is the same thing we were talking about. You know, this is what you were reading. The 501, this nonprofit organization doesn't matter. Matter of fact, if you're working for the government, you are a profit-driven company, okay? These ELINs, here's again the names of all the companies that should not be in there. Again, you know, where are you licensed? World-class programs in clean water. You know, over the time we've built a strong team, buzzwords with excellent competence, you know, in all areas of the project, reputation for quality, integrity, and value. None of this is, I mean, this is just like a mission statement that's off of your website. Questions or thoughts? Is it clear now how somebody, you know, wrote to what they wanted to say versus what the client wanted to hear? And do you think that this type of narrative is going to meet the requirements of what the government was looking for, or what the reader was looking for? Let's just say the owner, because I think that this can happen in any of the sectors.
Well, I'll jump in real quick. I did attend your quick session at Alliance Northwest, and when I learned this was going to occur, I jumped on it because I A, wanted to hear that again, and then B, this was an expansion of that, and I did gain quite a bit from, you know, this session as well. So I appreciate your willingness to share this with us. And I do believe, you know, there's just so much to be gained here that it takes a while to have it sink in. But just some of the big building blocks, when you just go and look at your own website or your last proposal, there's a lot of things that just jump right out at you, like, why did I do that? So I appreciate a lot of what you're showing us. I mean, you know, the old school approach is certainly something that, you know, I'd like to spend more time on trying to shed that from my vocabulary and my inclination, and look more for, you know, the 5 C's, or the concise and you know, best way to do it. So I appreciate what you've done.
Oh, We can, and I'm excited or anxious to get back to our in-person classes, because one of the things that we would do is, and if this continues much longer, we will incorporate it somehow, but to have you bring some of them and work through them together with you. You know, I can give you all this information, and I do hope that no matter how many times you see it or hear it, you take something away from it. But nothing works better than us sitting and working, you know, something real in front of us. Mary Jo and I did this class one time, and we actually had a 1.5-day class. We walked through it, and a lot of the participants were really excited and brought their last technical proposals to the class. And it was interesting because the morning of the second day after we'd gone through all of this, we noticed that none of the technical proposals were on the table any longer. They all kind of were like, no, we think we want to go back and not have you edit this right at the moment. So we are always willing to expand the class, do one-on-ones. And so if you've got the need, we've got the time, okay? And anything we can do. I hope you learn something every single time, but it is, you have to put it in, you have to apply it to what you're doing. And that is probably the hardest part. And we would love to help you do that.
So just a reminder that if you give us enough lead time, your PTAC counselor can review your proposal. And they will want the solicitation to review in advance. Carrie or Mary Jo, do you have anything to add to that?
Solicitation and all the amendments, and give it to us at least a week before the proposal is due. So we get a couple of days to review it, provide comments, meet with you to review it, and give you a couple of days to incorporate any changes before you have to get it submitted on time.
Yeah, Terry, how long did you work with PME on their big solicitation proposal?
Well, I met with them at the very beginning when the solicitation came out. We reviewed the solicitation together. We drafted up about 6 pre-proposal inquiries because of conflicts or ambiguities in the solicitation. They got answers back through amendments in the solicitation. And I think I met again about a week before the proposal was due and reviewed it, and they submitted it. And the good news story is they won the contract.
Yay!
Yeah, we cannot write your proposal, but we can review your proposal.
And it's a, you know, I'm very prejudiced, but this PTAC is very fortunate to have 3 retired contracting officers who have read thousands of proposals, have read thousands of capability statements, you know, have had, you know, even in some of the other services we, you know, handled thousands of REAs and claims and issues. So you've got to really, I mean, this PTAC has that capability that is not necessarily available in all the other PTACs. So take advantage of it, especially doing government work. Now we're more than happy. I believe all of this information applies to all types of clients. But of course, the selection process on the private sector is a lot more subjective than objective, but you still are catering to the client's risk. No matter what you're doing, no matter how the selection criteria is, there's 3 important things I think for the takeaway is 1, you have to learn to write to what the client wants, not what you want to tell them. And that's a really hard obstacle to get over. Second thing is you want to address their risk. They're always going to, whether it be you're hiring someone for personal services or you're working in the private sector, you're always going to be addressing risk. You know, how can I convince them that their risk is low with me, that I have got the experience, I've done it before. And the third thing, of course, is, you know, no fluff. Let's get to the bullets. Let's get to the point. Let's keep it clean, concise. Let's keep it, you know, qualitative, quantitative, you know, don't give them doubt. And those are really the big takeaways I hope that you got from this. So with that, I will always say, now this is where I always say, no matter what I told you about marketing, it still is marketing. Okay, let's be honest about it. You will, in most cases, this will be the first impression, and first impressions, of course, you never get a second chance for that. So always assume that the reader doesn't know you. okay? Don't go on, unless you are Microsoft or Bill Gates or Starbucks, the reader does not know who you are, okay? And you need to make sure that you write to that, you cater to that, and that you make yourself very visible in their mind. Don't assume that they just know you. Ensure the client knows the company at the top, that the top is interested and committed to providing the requirements. You know, wherever possible, org chart, the person signing it, I would make sure that it's signed by the CEO, the president. You know, it's just those little subtle things that if the proposal is signed by the marketing manager, you know, again, are you sending the message that your company is fully committed? Okay. Or is this just another job that you've passed off to your marketing people? I would try to make that extra effort. You know, picture says 1,000 words. We've encouraged you to insert them in your narrative. You can show the jobs that you've done. You can show the services you've provided. You can show some of the things that you've accomplished. Pictures on your front page are very important. They kind of say 1,000 words right off the bat before you even open it. So we encourage you to use some of these opportunities in marketing to blend into your technical proposal to not only make it interesting, but to help sell the company and sell your product. Make sure that the package is indestructible. We've talked about that. I mean, I'm not saying this is number one, but I'm saying it has happened in the past and it's very unfortunate. You know, you do want to stand out from the crowd. One of the things that I like to point out is that the government has probably, I'm even going to guess maybe 500,000 white binders that they get from all of the technical proposals or proposals that are given. And everybody in the world goes down to Staples and gets the binder that has the little insert in the front, and they put the little picture in the front. And then when all those 40 or 50 proposals are done, and we've got 8 copies of each, now they are reducing them because of the electronic submittals. But the government has $500,000 white binders that they will never use. We send more to excess, and so stand out from the crowd. If everybody's using the white binders and you're submitting a construction project and it's got LEED certifications, which means they want to go green, or you're making an environmental pitch, why are you not using some kind of biodegradable cover page or binders that you can get? I mean, just stand out from the crowd. You know, like I said, if I saw 40 proposals, all of them are those little 1-inch binders and all of them have an insert that you slide in and can pull out, you're just not standing out from the crowd. You're just one of the 40. So again, think about those type of things and let your marketing people in that case go crazy. If you can get ahead of it and know the proposal's coming out, sometimes you can have them printed up on, you know, recycled bamboo pages or something. Cover sheet, paper quality, packaging, those are all something that's very important. I just talked about that. You know, if it's a slide-in sheet, you know, if you've actually just, I see proposals, and I have to admit my company, I even find my company is a little guilty of this. They have blank pages and they put on there blank page. You know, I'm not sure why we would send something in that says this is a blank page on purpose. You know, it may be for printing purposes, but if we're submitting it, we should never have blank pages. I don't think it's even necessary to have a one page that just says title page. I cannot figure out why we have a white piece of paper that says title page and the next page is the title page. That just kind of blows me away. So think about that. There is a theory of color, font tables, following marketing strategy. We have a marketing class. We actually have a slideshow we can send you, and you can Google it, but color does have evoke emotion. It does create an environment. It also distinguishes, you know, like we had one client that we were working with that their colors, they've been in business for like 40 years and their colors from their company are very outdated and it showed their age. You know, so theory of color does evoke emotion. It does tell you how current you are. And it tells you a lot of things. If you're very energy efficient, eco environment, you know, you're not going to have bright colors and stuff. So again, think about what you're selling. Okay. And with that, we, you know, I always say,
Mona,
yes.
I have some questions.
Okay.
Are the proposal readers often from the fields they were reading the proposals in?
Say that one more time.
So NAVFAC, only
Yes.
people at NAVFAC read the proposals, correct?
I'm going to say 99% of the time, yes. Now they may, in certain cases, they may have another government entity, say an environmental person or something that they called it because of a specialty. But yes, it is generally the agency that is ordering it, is the people are employed by that agency that are reviewing it.
Okay, so then they say that we've often tried to keep our colors colorblind friendly, as engineering is still a male dominated field and there are a lot of colorblind men in our field. Is it worth limiting our color palettes to make sure tables and junk are easier to read for colorblind readers, or should we treat it as general public?
I would say my personal opinion is general. I mean, I don't think if color blindness is something that is more relevant in the team that's looking at it, they're already kind of used to that. But again, you can do that without color. I guess my comment is I would treat it as a general. I would try to accommodate it whenever possible, but not hinder yourself. But I would also try to make sure that the presentation isn't contingent upon color. You know, for example, even looking at the one I have up on the slide, up on the screen here, is there are different things. I just went and Googled these, but you can see that you can have a cover page that's just all narrative with no breakup or any kind of, you know, pictures or colors. And even if you're colorblind, the one on the left is at least going to show pictures, you know, what you do, you know, what you're, in this case, it's an arena, what their mascot is. So you can still make a presentation that's not contingent upon color to make it interesting for the reader. I hope that answered that.
Okay, thanks.
May I add to the answer for Ryan? In his first part of his question, he talked about technical evaluation board members from the field reading the proposal. I've been assigned to all aspects of a source selection. I was a technical evaluation board member. I was the contracting officer. I was a price evaluation board member. I was a source selection authority. I ran the gamut on all aspects of source selection. And to answer his question, Ryan, I was a contract specialist and I was a member of the technical evaluation board. So not always are all the members of the board the technical people that are going to be evaluating the proposal. Our agency, Naval Facilities Engineering Command, always had at least one technical person on the board, but they could be more. They could be no more than that one technical person. The rest are just made up of maybe acquisition people. So it can be a combination, and different agencies may have different policies of the makeup of the technical evaluation board. That's all I have.
Of course, Terry, I won't add that they usually put contracting officers or specialists with the technical people because we don't trust them. Those dogs, they'll do something illegal. So, but that's internal. So I hope that helped. I mean, I do recognize, and if you recognize that the engineering field does have a lot of that is a consistent, I don't know quite how to word it, an obstacle, you know, I mean, if that happens a lot, I would try to cater to it, but I would not in any way downplay how your professional performance should be. Representation. I do also comment that sometimes we will go, evaluators, and regardless whether they be government or not, may go to your website. They want to know more about you. And I often find that there's a conflict. You might have a certain color format and presentation on this, but your website is entirely different. I mean, and there's just, that is not objective. That is purely sitting in the back of someone's brain. I once read a proposal where the company said, we have 3 distinct areas of services, and they went on to go on about that. I went to their website and they actually had like 5 distinctive areas of services. And it was a kind of a conflict as well. I don't know why why there's such a disconnect. It wasn't important, but it just is a disconnect. So again, this is all going back on in the background, kind of like, stage presentation. So I hope that helps. But going back to this is that, again, I just pulled them off the internet. These are not equal proposals, but you can see that here's this, basically a technical report, which is not really an evaluation. versus a proposal for an arena, you know. And again, they're presenting on an arena. They definitely want to show some gyms related. They want to show that they are very, what they are specifically doing. Now in this case, they're addressing their client. I'm assuming that they're building an arena for this Tiger team, Towson Tiger Arena. Again, you want to be careful on how you represent the client on here, as if you've already married, you're already part of this. Can't you just see yourself? I know that those are marketing ploys, just be careful. A lot of times in certain areas, you're not allowed to use certain logos or certain things without their written permission. So you want to be careful that you also aren't pissing them off. The government, that happens a lot. We as government contracting officers knew that you aren't allowed to use the USN logo without permission. I mean, excuse me. And to use it says it's kind of a disregard of our policies. So just be careful on how you do that. So again, first presentation, representation, and even in, hold on a second, my computer does not want to cooperate. And even if you use color, there's again a distinction between these two proposals, okay? The difference, and I'm sorry they're a little bit blurry, or one of them is a little bit blurry, but there's a clear distinction on which one is more attractive, which one is better representative of the company. Again, you can use color, but if you don't add anything important or presentation or use of space, or pictures, you kind of have undersold your opportunity here. So first impressions, marketing is a key factor. It should never be involved in the actual writing of the proposal because it's just too much fluff. But the actual packaging, you should 100% support marketing opportunities. So that's a little early. I was going to try to wrap this up a little bit ahead of time so you guys aren't all bored, but we have a few minutes. Does anybody have any comments or specific questions and I even accept negative criticism. Not well, but I do accept it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My name's Trisha Lewis, and a lot of the companies now are requesting everything to be PDF'd, and it's really hard it's just pieces of paper, it's just a screenshot or whatever. How do I make it friendlier for them to use, or printing wise, they're going to print it so they can look at it and then ends up in black and white. So, I mean, do you have any suggestions or ideas on how to make your PDF friendlier for them to use? Or I'm not sure how to, because it seems so flat to me when I'm sending that. I did years of sending the binder with the information and the tabs, and you can clearly make it, special, and no special in a PDF.
Yeah. Excuse me. I do find, and maybe people, maybe there are others that have good suggestions. Again, I can manage through it, but I have learned that when I do a PDF, any tables, any charts that I put in there along those lines, I make them, you can make them a PDF, and then you can convert them to a picture, and then you can take that picture and actually incorporate it in the rest of your document. And it will print out in color then. It'll print, and I have found that as a useful tool. So, and most of the time, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the time the narrative is fine. It's where you've got to add charts or tables, or actually even on those evaluation criteria or the past performance that we looked at with the pictures and stuff. You might have to recreate them in a Word document and insert pictures. But I found that if I do it as a picture instead of a text or a narrative or a clip or a PDF even, it will then print in color. And I don't know if anybody else has any suggestions, but that works for me. And they definitely like the PDFs. And again, for the same reason, they can search them. They can do things that will help them during the evaluation. And one of the things that is to me clumsy is if you print it all out and then feed it through a scanner to a PDF, it's not searchable because they just, for some reason, if you actually transfer it from your printer to a PDF, it is not searchable generally. So it is an art. Does anybody else have any suggestions on that? Because that seems to work for me. Kathy, you guys do a lot of presentation and a lot of marketing stuff. And Kathy is temporarily not there, so we will get you some more information. Did that help at all?
Yeah, it seems to be everything's going all PDF. And so how do you stand out in the PDF and how do you make it easier for them? So I do like that about the searchable. There's some things that we've scanned and then inserted it and now it's not searchable. I didn't think about that. So
Yeah.
I'll have to look at how we build it. Thank you.
Anytime. And I know I'm not an expert in computer programs. I generally have to hunt around until I find something that works for me, but I'm sure other people have some suggestions. And I know Kathy would have some for you because they do a lot of marketing and they do a lot of that type of processes. So she may herself or the crew from the PTAC office would know that. So. Anybody else, any feedback, any questions you have, a burning desire, something I might not have hit on for you, something that really relates just to you or that you've run across? Okay, well, Kathy will make available the presentation. I will make sure that I get it to her. I've added a couple slides. We actually do have some, again, we have originally set up for a 1.5-day course. So I actually have longer presentation material that we can make available to you, just even if we don't have a class that might have some more information in it for you. I strongly encourage you to work with your PTAC. I mean, they are great people. They have great advice. They can tell you, especially this crew, because we're past readers. That's what we did for our real living is we read things. Back and forth, up and down, and every way but Tuesday. So with that, Kathy, I don't think she must have just stepped out for a moment. If you don't have any other questions, I really appreciate you attending. Look at our schedule. Make sure you see our other upcoming classes. If there's anything today that sparked an interest, like for example, pricing and how you fill out those CLINs and how you make sure your overheads and stuff are done right, let Kathy know. Like I said, if we get enough attendees, we'll put together a class specifically for that. Or if not, we'll send you the class presentation we have already on file, and maybe that will help. So I hope you all have a great day, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Myrna.
Leslie, this is Terry. Can you stay on the line? I have a question for you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Leslie, you there? Leslie, you're muted. Her name's there. She's gone. Okay. No. Leslie, are you there? Okay. I'm gone.